The first thing you feel as a 1900s Tallinn Tar Kettle Man is the damp Baltic cold settling into your sleeves, while the black iron kettle waits beside the stones. Settle in and let the work find its slow pace. We're here beside you tonight, near the harbour air and the old roofs of Tallinn, where tar, smoke, timber and morning mist all seem to breathe together. The city is still half asleep when you arrive, though the gulls have already started their thin cries over the water. Your boots meet cobbles slick with dew, and the small yard smells of wet ash, old rope, pine boards, and the sour sweetness of tar left from yesterday's work. In the 1900s Tallinn morning, you don't begin with force, but with patience, because the kettle is never hurried into usefulness. You check the ground first, as you've been taught to do, looking for a level place where the kettle will sit steady and where the fire can draw without being bullied by the wind. The iron is cold under your hand, rough at the rim, with yesterday's blackened crust clinging in small ridges like cooled sugar. Nearby, a stack of split wood waits under a worn piece of canvas, and you lift it back with fingers already stiff from the air. The job looks simple from a distance, and that is part of why it's hard. A passerby sees only a man, a pot, a fire, and a dark liquid that softens when heated. But you know how many small judgments live inside that quiet shape, how the flame must be fed, how the tar must loosen, how smoke speaks before danger does, and how the day can be ruined by one careless stretch of heat. We begin where you begin, with kindling. You crouch close to the stones and lay the smallest pieces first. Dry splinters, curled shavings, a few chips saved from a carpenter's floor. The smell rises before the flame does, clean and woody, with a faint resin sweetness that feels almost warm in the nose. Your hands know the order, even when your thoughts are slow. By the turn of the 1900s, Tallinn is a city between old walls and new machinery, between Hanseatic memories and the Russian Empire's paperwork, between horse carts on wet streets and workshops growing louder near the harbour. Some still call it Rival in ledgers and official notices, and you hear both names in the yard, depending on who is speaking and what language the morning carries. For you, it is simply the place where the kettle has to heat. The first flame is small, and you shield it with your body. Smoke slips sideways in the sea wind, pale at first, then thicker as the wood catches. You listen to the crackle and the hush between crackles, and you feel the cold in your knees where your trousers pull tight. Nothing much has happened yet, but already the work has begun. Tar is stubborn when it is cold. It sits heavy in the kettle, dull black, sometimes brown at the edges where old light finds it, smelling of pine roots, smoke, ships, roofs, and long storage in wooden barrels. When you press a stick into it, the surface gives almost nothing, then dents with a slow reluctant pull. It is not a liquid yet, it is a memory of fire waiting to become useful again. Your task is to bring it back without spoiling it. Too cool, and it drags on the brush, clumps on the wood, refuses to run into seams or spread across boards. Too hot, and it sharpens, smokes harshly, loses the patient thickness that workers depend on, and threatens more trouble than any sleepy morning should contain. So you watch the flame under the kettle, you watch the edge of the tar where it meets the iron, you watch the smoke, because smoke is often more honest than a man's guess. It tells you when the fire is hungry, when the kettle is taking heat too quickly, and when the wind has begun to make a private argument with your careful arrangement. The yard wakes by degrees around you. A cartwheel knocks softly over a stone outside the gate. Somewhere beyond the roofs, a church bell marks an hour that belongs mostly to workers and bakers. From the harbour comes the blunt sound of timber meeting timber, a rope hauled over a bollard, a voice made flat by distance and fog. You stand close to the kettle, and the world widens without becoming loud. The hardship of the Tallinn Tar Kettle Man is not only the weight or the smoke, though both are honest enough. It is the need to stay attentive while doing work that repeats itself so calmly that others assume attention is easy. You must be present for a change in smell, a shift in sheen, a tremble in the dark surface. You must notice the almost invisible things. As the first warmth gathers in the iron, the tar begins to answer. It softens at the wall of the kettle before it softens in the center, and the stick moves a little farther now, with a thick sucking sound. You stir slowly, not to make a show of effort, but to share heat through the mass. The stick grows sticky in your hand, and the tar clings to it in shining ropes before folding back into itself. There is comfort in this part, if you let yourself feel it. The fire is alive but contained. The kettle is heavy but obedient. The morning is cold, yet your face warms on one side, and your coat holds the heat like a small borrowed room. We stay here with you, near the first useful stirring, where the day has not asked for speed yet. Soon the roofers will want the tar carried or drawn off. A boatman may come by with a seam needing treatment. A carpenter may grumble that the mixture is too stiff, then return later to say nothing at all, which is how some men offer thanks. For now, you have the rare quiet before other people's timing becomes part of yours. The Tar Kettle Man's tools are plain: an iron kettle, a poker, a stirring rod, buckets with dark rims, a ladle sometimes, brushes made rough by old use, rags that are never clean again once they enter this trade. None of these things looks precious, yet each has its own place, and you come to know them by touch. The bucket handle bites into your palm before the day is half started. The poker grows warm near the tip and leaves soot along your fingers. The brush stiffens overnight and must be coaxed back toward usefulness, bristle by bristle, with heat and pressure and a little patience. Even your boots become part of the work, because spilled tar finds leather and remembers it. In Tallinn's colder months, the job asks more of you before anyone notices. Tar thickens in storage, water freezes in shallow ruts, and the wind off the Gulf of Finland comes through alleys with a clean, hard edge. You arrive before the useful warmth exists, and you must make it. That is the quiet bargain of the work. You learn to dress in layers that can accept smoke. Wool holds warmth, but it also holds every smell of the yard. So by evening you carry home tar, ash, damp wood, and harbor air in the folds of your clothes. Your hands smell darker than soap can fully remove. Even at supper, when you lift bread, the day is still faintly there, and yet the work is not only roughness. There are moments when the tar shines like black glass under the pale sky, and the stirred surface turns slowly with a deep, rounded gleam. There are mornings when the smoke rises straight for a few breaths, as if the air itself has decided to help you. There are small satisfactions in getting the heat exactly right. By mid-morning, the kettle has become the center of the yard, and every errand seems to bend around its warmth. Men come near it to speak, to warm their hands, to check whether their own part of the work can begin. You answer quietly, because loudness feels out of place beside a substance that changes so slowly. Your eyes remain on the rim. The first bucket drawn from the kettle is always a test of the whole morning. You lift carefully, feeling the weight gather at the end of your arm, while the dark surface moves with a thick rolling drag. The metal handle presses through your glove. A sweet burned smell rises from the bucket, mixed with iron, smoke, and the damp mineral scent of the stones beneath your feet. You carry it as steadily as you can. The bucket swings if your stride becomes proud, so you keep your steps small. The yard teaches humility through balance. Each footfall on the cobbles matters, and your body learns the shape of caution without needing to name it. If the tar is for a roof, you may climb after the others, one hand free, the bucket kept low, your shoulder turning through narrow spaces. Roofwork in Old Tallinn brings you close to tiles, boards, chimneys, and the pale winter sky. The pitch or tar goes where rain would otherwise enter, into seams, joints, patches, edges, and places where weather has been quietly working for years. From up there, the city looks softer than it feels underfoot. Red roofs, dark roofs, church towers, pale walls, and the harbor beyond them, all held in a thin wash of smoke and sea haze. Your hands are doing practical work, yet your eyes are given a view that belongs to few people at that hour. We can rest there a moment, with the brush in your hand and the bucket close by. The brush pulls heavily at first, Worn tar grips the bristles and strings between them, then spreads with a wet, dragging whisper across wood or felt. You press it into cracks, not quickly, but firmly, letting it fill the small spaces that rain would find if given time. This is part of the hardship too, the way your back must bend, while your attention stays fine. The smell is stronger on a roof, because the wind changes it. Sometimes the smoke moves away and leaves only the resinous sweetness. Sometimes it curls back into your face, thick and bitter, making your eyes water until the world blurs at the edges. You blink, breathe through your mouth, and keep the brush moving in the old rhythm. A Tallinn Tar Kettle Man of the 1900s lives close to weather. Rain changes the day, snow changes the day. A sharp wind can cool the tar too quickly in the bucket, making each stroke heavier and less obedient. Sun can help, though in northern light it often helps gently, without ever becoming a full warmth you can trust. When the weather turns against you, you learn to divide the work into smaller pieces. Heat a little, carry a little, spread a little, return before the bucket stiffens too much. The day becomes a loop, and the loop becomes almost soothing, if your body can bear it. Fire, kettle, bucket, roof, brush, return. There is a quiet intelligence in repetition. Your mind doesn't leave the work, exactly, but it settles into a lower room of itself. You notice the sound of your own breath. You notice tar cooling on the brush. You notice a gull's cry arrive a moment before the wind shifts across the roofline. By now, your hands know more than your thoughts need to say. And as the morning wears on, the hardest part is no longer beginning the fire, but keeping the whole small system steady while the city asks for one more bucket, one more patch, one more careful carrying across the stones. Back in the yard, the kettle has to be fed again. You add wood without smothering the flame, leaning close enough to feel the heat bloom against your cheek. The fire accepts the new pieces with a low crackle, and sparks move briefly in the ash like tiny orange seeds. You step back before smoke folds over you. The kettle itself becomes familiar in a way that is almost companionable. You know which side draws hotter when the wind comes from the harbor. You know where old tar clings near the lip. You know how the iron sounds when the stirring rod touches it through the softened mass. No book teaches that as well as standing beside it for many mornings. In the 1900s, work like yours is often learned by watching. Someone older shows you without turning it into a lesson. He may point once with his chin, or take the rod from your hand and make 3 slow turns, then give it back without a speech. You learn because the kettle will punish guessing, and because the men around you have no use for unnecessary words. Still, there is talk, quiet talk. A few words about the price of wood, a complaint about wet barrels, a remark about a ship in harbor, or a cousin looking for work, or a roof that has leaked in the same cursed corner for 10 years. You listen with one ear, while the other remains tuned to the sound below the kettle. Sometimes, the tar comes in barrels marked from elsewhere, and sometimes it carries the scent of pine forests more clearly than the yard around you. Pine tar has a long history around the Baltic, drawn from wood heated slowly with limited air, collected dark and sticky, valued for ships, ropes, roofs, and tools that must face water. In your hands, old forest labor becomes city labor. That thought doesn't need to become grand. It is enough to smell the resin and know that the material has traveled. Somewhere, men stacked billets of pine and tended another slow heat, watching smoke and temperature as you do now. Their patience arrives in your kettle. Your patience carries it onward. Coal tar and bituminous mixtures also belong to the changing world around you, especially as streets, roofs, and industrial work shift with new materials and habits. The words may vary from yard to yard, and men may call several dark substances by the same practical name when the task is simply to seal, coat, and protect. What matters to you is how it behaves when warmed. You learn materials by resistance. This batch pulls long and stringy. That one spreads smoother. One smokes too sharply if the flame rises even a little. Another cools into a skin before you've crossed half the yard. Your knowledge is stored in wrists, nose, eyes, and the careful pace of your feet. The difficulty lies in being accountable to a substance that never speaks plainly. A clerk can point to a number in a ledger. A shopkeeper can count coins. You must read shine, smell, drag, and smoke. all while your hands are dirty and your boots are near the fire? The answer is never written on the kettle. By late morning, the cold has loosened a little, but it hasn't gone. It stays in shaded walls, in the handles of tools, in the damp cuffs of your trousers. Warmth comes in pieces, one side of the body at a time. Your face heats near the kettle, while your back remembers the wind. You take a small pause when the fire allows it. Bread from a cloth, maybe a bit of fish, onion, or cheese if the morning has been kind. Your fingers leave dark smudges no matter how carefully you hold the food, and the taste of smoke seems to sit behind every bite. You eat slowly, because rushing makes no sense beside the kettle. We stay beside you in that ordinary pause, where nothing dramatic happens and the whole day seems to breathe through the yard. A horse passes beyond the gate. Iron rims strike stone with a hollow rhythm. The harbor answers with chains, boards, and voices. Your lunch is plain, but the warmth in your hands makes it enough. Then the work gathers itself again. The tar needs stirring. The roofers need more. The fire has eaten through the last wood and asks quietly for another piece. You fold the cloth, wipe your hands as well as you can, and return to the black iron rim. The day has not moved quickly, but it has moved. By midday, the light over Tallinn has changed, and the Tar Kettle Man's work shifts from starting and testing into the long keeping of heat, weight, smoke, and patience. The middle of the day is where mistakes can hide. Morning makes you alert because everything is cold and reluctant. Evening makes you careful because the body is tired. But midday can trick you with its sameness, with the fire seeming steady, the tar seeming ready, the requests coming in an ordinary line. This is when you must be most quietly awake. You stand near the kettle and scrape the rod along the bottom, feeling for thick places that haven't fully joined the rest. The sound is dull through the tar, more felt than heard. A faint bubble rises near the side and breaks with a soft, sticky sound. You pause, then stir again, slower. Around you, Tallinn keeps working. The old town streets carry footsteps, carts, market talk, and the clatter of small trades that never make much history in books. A woman passes with a basket under a cloth. A boy lingers near the gate until someone sends him on. Somewhere, a hammer strikes in regular blows, each one softened by distance and damp air. Your job belongs to these background sounds. It isn't a public craft like a merchant's call, or a fine craft like carving, or a visible office with ink and stamps. It is necessary work, near the edges of things, where water must be kept out and wood must be made to last a little longer. Much of what you do is noticed only when it has failed. That can make a man feel invisible, but there is also peace in it. You don't need applause from a sealed seam. You don't need praise from a roof that sheds rain. The work gives its answer later, quietly, when storms pass and the boards beneath remain dry. Some forms of usefulness are almost silent. When you carry another bucket, the weight is different now. Your arms have warmed into the labor, but they have also begun to tire. The handle presses the same place each time, and by habit you shift your grip before it becomes too sore. The bucket gives off heat through its sides, not enough to burn through air, but enough to remind you not to let it brush your leg. A narrow stair can become a whole problem. Tar does not forgive a slip. You climb with your shoulder near the wall, one foot tested before the next, while the smell rises from the bucket and clings close under your chin. The stairwood feels worn in the middle. Your breath stays measured. At the top, someone may take the bucket, or you may set it where the work is being done. You listen to instructions that are really just fragments. Here, along this edge, not too much, more near the chimney. The language of roofing is often pointing, tapping, and practical complaint. You understand enough. The brushwork has its own rhythm. Dip, lift, turn the wrist, lay the tar down, press, draw, return. The bristles leave ridged lines that shine wetly for a few moments before slowly settling. If the surface is rough, the brush catches and jerks. If the tar is right, it moves heavily, but faithfully, filling what needs filling. The smell gathers in your clothes. It isn't a single smell, once you know it well. There is smoke from the fire, sharper when the wood is poor. There is hot iron. There is pine sweetness, mineral bitterness, old soot, damp wool, and the faint salt breath of the harbor. The day writes itself into the air around you. Listeners half asleep might imagine only blackness in tar, but you see colors inside it. Brown at the thin edge, bronze where light catches a stretched strand, blue-gray smoke above it, red ember glow beneath the kettle, white steam from damp wood if someone has stacked it badly. Your world is dark, yes, but never empty. The hardship is also in cleanliness, or the lack of it. Tar travels. It finds cuffs, sleeves, tool handles, door edges and the side of your boot, where you didn't think anything had touched. A small smear becomes a larger one when you try to wipe it away. You learn to accept a certain darkness on the hands. At home, perhaps someone has a place for your work clothes. They don't belong near bedding. They don't belong near clean linen. Even dried tar has a voice in the room, a lingering smell of labor and smoke. You may scrub, but the skin around your nails keeps its shadow. Still, the city needs what you do. Tallinn's weather is patient and persistent, and water is always looking for entry. Rain runs down rooflines, meltwater finds cracks, sea air works into rope, wood, iron, and stone. A coating of tar can give a surface more time. A sealed seam can save a room from damp. We can think of your work as a conversation with water, not a battle, exactly. Battles are too loud for this. It is more like a long negotiation. You warm the tar, carry it, spread it, press it into gaps, and ask the weather to wait. Sometimes it does. As the afternoon approaches, the kettle has been heated, stirred, emptied, and fed so many times that the work feels almost circular, and in that circle, the body begins to ask for mercy in small, unmistakable ways. The first sign is in your shoulders, where the morning's lifting has settled like a quiet stone. Not painful yet, but present with every bucket. You roll one shoulder back while the kettle breathes smoke, and the movement pulls at your coat, stiffened here and there by old tar. The fire snaps under the iron, and for a moment you can smell only ash, hot metal, and the damp wool at your own cuffs. You do not leave the kettle simply because your body is tired. A 1900s Tallinn Tar Kettle Man learns that tiredness is part of the measure, like wind direction or the color of smoke. You give it a place, and then you work around it. Your hands adjust, your steps shorten, and your eyes stay patient on the surface of the tar, where a dull skin may form if you forget it too long. By now, the yard has lost the silver look of morning. The stones are darker where feet have passed, and muddy water sits in shallow hollows near the wall. A horse has left a warm smell at the gate, mixed with straw and wet leather. Someone has dragged a plank across the ground, and its end has drawn a pale scar through the soot. All these small marks tell you that work has been moving around you. The kettle's heat changes the air close to your body. If you step back too far, the Baltic cold takes your face again. If you stand too close, your cheeks tighten from the warmth, and your eyes sting from the smoke. So you keep a narrow middle distance, shifting one boot and then the other, making a small private dance no one would bother to notice. There is a rhythm to feeding the fire that feels almost like breathing. You do not throw wood in carelessly. You place it where the flame can take it cleanly, leaving space for air to move below the kettle. A choking fire makes a lazy smoke and an uneven heat, and you have no use for either. The flame must be alive, but it must also be contained. Sometimes a younger worker comes too near, drawn by the warmth, and you tell him quietly to mind his sleeves. He smiles as if he already knows, because young men often believe knowing means having heard something once. You do not argue. You only watch him step back, when a breath of smoke rolls low and bitter across the stones, teaching the lesson in its own slow way. The tar is ready again when the rod moves with the right resistance. It does not feel watery, and it does not fight like cold wax. It folds and stretches, lifting in dark chords that shine before they sink back. You draw the rod upward, let the black thread fall, and watch how quickly it joins the surface. That little fall tells you almost as much as a thermometer would. Many yards do not give you a proper gauge. You have your eyes, nose, hands, and long habit. You know when the smoke turns too sharp. You know when the surface glitters too angrily in the heat. You know when the tar should be moved now, before it thickens again in the bucket. This is the old practical science of the Tallinn Tar Kettle Man, learned in smoke rather than classrooms. When another bucket is needed, you set it near the kettle first, close enough to warm, but not so close that the handle bites back with heat. The rim is already blackened. You brace it with your boot, tilt the ladle, and let the tar fall in a heavy ribbon. It lands with a soft sound, like thick cloth being folded into a box. The smell deepens as the bucket fills. Warm tar has a sweetness that can almost seem comforting until too much of it gathers under the nose. Then it becomes thick, smoky, and bitter at the back of the throat. You swallow, blink once, and steady the ladle. There is no virtue in wasting the material, and there is less virtue in wearing it. Your fingers ache where they close around the handle. Even through cloth, the weight announces itself. The bucket is not enormous, because no sensible worker wants a heroic load of hot tar. But small weight carried many times becomes a long argument with the body. By afternoon, your wrist remembers every journey, even when the yard looks unchanged. You cross the stones slowly, past a stack of boards and a coil of rope gone dark with old weather. The rope smells faintly of hemp, tar, and salt. It lies with a sailor's neatness, though no sailor may have touched it today. Tallinn's harbour habits reach inland by small degrees, into yards, roofs, cellars and sheds, and the tar follows those same lines of usefulness. A man repairing a roof edge calls down for you to wait, so you stop at the foot of the ladder. Waiting with a hot bucket is its own work. You do not set it on a slope. You do not swing it at your side. You breathe through the smell and feel the heat against your leg, while above you boots scrape on boards and a muted curse drifts down into the cold air. When the call comes, you climb. The ladder flexes slightly, not enough to frighten you, but enough to remind you of your own weight and the bucket's. Your gloved hand finds each rung. Your boot follows. The tar shifts in the bucket with a slow inner movement, and you keep your balance by becoming smaller inside yourself, quieter, more exact. Up near the roofline, the world opens again. The old walls of Tallinn seem to gather and loosen under the afternoon light, with chimneys standing like dark fingers against the pale sky. Smoke from other stoves rises in different shades, grey, brown, nearly white, each one belonging to another room and another day's labour. You pause only long enough to hand the bucket over. The roofer's brush is already stiff at the edges. He presses it into the tar and works along a seam where rain has found its way before. You watch for a breath, because it is your tar too, your fire and timing and carrying made visible on the boards. It spreads well, heavy, but not stubborn. You feel a small private relief, the kind that does not need a word. Then you are back down, because the kettle will not tend itself. The return journey feels lighter, though your arm still remembers the weight. Empty buckets carry their own smell, metallic and dark, with tar cooling in streaks along the inside. You set it near the others, rim down on a bit of scrap wood, so dirt does not climb into it from the stones. Afternoon in a working yard can become crowded without becoming noisy. People pass behind you. Someone shifts boards. Someone rolls a barrel with a dull, hollow thump. A clerk may appear with clean cuffs and careful shoes, staying far enough from the soot to preserve both. You answer him politely, but your eyes remain on the kettle. If he asks how much longer, the honest answer is always more complicated than he wants. It depends on the fire, the weather, the batch, the roof, the hands available, and the condition of the surfaces being coated. But you say soon, or a little while, because the world often prefers small words for large patience. He nods, perhaps understanding none of it, and goes away. The Tar Kettle Man's difficulty is partly that his work sits between other trades. Roofers wait on him, carpenters depend on him, boat repairers know him when seams need sealing. Yard owners ask for speed, but weather asks for care. You are not always the center of attention, yet if you are careless, everyone feels the result later, usually through a leak. You stir again, and the rod pulls a darker weight from the bottom. The surface has begun to thicken near one side where the wind cools the iron unevenly. You turn the mass slowly. making the hot middle meet the reluctant edge. Steam or smoke moves upward, and for a moment the smell is sharp enough to make your eyes close. When you open them, the tar has smoothed again. There is a kind of listening that happens through the hands. The rod tells you what the surface cannot. A thin scrape means the bottom is nearly clear. A heavy drag means cold material is gathering. A sudden roughness may mean debris, old crust, or a bit of char that must be lifted away before it spoils the finish. You listen with your wrists. No one passing the gate would call this knowledge elegant. They might see only black hands and smoke. But there is elegance in not needing much, in standing beside a kettle and understanding its changes through ordinary senses. The work has no polished instrument panel, no clean dial, no printed instruction nailed to the wall. It has you, the fire, the iron, and time. As the afternoon settles more deeply over Tallinn, the yard begins to ask not for beginning or carrying alone, but for maintenance, repair, and the endless small corrections that keep the whole day from fraying. A little tar has spilled near the kettle. Not much, only a dark crescent on the stone where a ladle leaned wrong for half a breath. While it is warm, it glistens. When it cools, it will become a tacky trap for dust, straw, grit, and the edge of someone's boot. You take a scrap of wood and draw it away before it can become part of tomorrow's trouble. This is another thing that makes the job hard. Tar leaves reminders. A careless moment becomes a mark on the yard, the ladder, the threshold, the cuff, the tool handle. You learn to clean as you go. Though clean is never a pure word here. It means less sticky. It means safer underfoot. It means the next bucket can be lifted without yesterday's mistake clinging to the handle. Your rag is already nearly black. It was probably never white, or if it was, that belongs to a past too clean to imagine. You fold it, use one corner, then another, making the dirt serve a little longer. The cloth warms in your hand. Tar strings between rag and iron for a moment before snapping back in a dark thread. A man might think the work is only about heating, but the true day is full of edges. The edge of the kettle, the edge of the roof, the edge of a board where water gathers, the edge of a bucket where tar clings and thickens, the edge of tiredness where attention begins to loosen. You live at those edges, and you smooth what you can. In the old parts of Tallinn, buildings hold many materials close together. Stone foundations, timber beams, plastered walls, tile or metal roofing, patched sheds, little back structures added when families or trades needed more room. Water finds all the joins between them. Your heated tar is one of the city's modest answers to those joins, a dark seal laid down by hand. You may be called to a shed roof behind a workshop where rain has been dropping on stored boards. The path there is narrow, and you carry a small pot instead of a full bucket. The shed smells of sawdust, damp lumber, mouse dust, and old iron nails. Light enters through a crack and shows floating dust moving gently around you like breath. Inside, the leak has left a dark stain on a beam. You touch the wood with the back of your fingers and feel the chill of damp. Outside, above the same place, a seam has opened where two boards have shifted through seasons of swelling and drying. This is not a grand repair. It is the kind of repair that keeps ordinary things from becoming ruined. You warm the pot again near the yard fire before climbing. A small quantity cools faster, so you move with care but without delay. The brush goes into the tar, then onto the seam, and you press along the line with patient force. The tar fills the gap slowly, taking the shape offered to it. It shines, then begins to dull as air works on its surface. Your fingers feel the roof through your boots. A slight give here, a firmer board there. You place weight where the structure answers well. The wind carries the harbor smell over the roof, salt and wet rope and fish faintly under the smoke. A bell rings somewhere behind you, but the sound arrives softened, as if wrapped in cloth. When you come down, the shed owner wants to know if it will hold. You could say many things about weather, wood, and time. Instead, you say that it should, if the boards do not shift too much. That is the truest gentle answer. No tar kettle man promises eternity. You offer a season, a year, a little protection, and honest work. Back in the main yard, the fire has settled into coals. This can be useful if you need steady heat, but not if the kettle begins to cool too much. You kneel, poker in hand, and open the bed of embers. Red light glows under grey ash. You add split wood, narrow pieces first, then one larger piece set crosswise, so air can find it. The smoke changes with the fresh wood. For a while it smells green, almost damp, even though the pieces seemed dry enough under the canvas. It drifts low, clinging to your knees. You shift the canvas farther away, because sparks have a way of making trouble when a tired man assumes they will behave. The yard has taught you not to assume much. There are days when the wood is poor, and the whole job becomes harder. Wet fuel spits, smokes, and spends itself badly. It makes your eyes sting, and leaves the kettle sulking over uneven heat. Good dry wood feels like cooperation.
Poor wood feels like hauling the day uphill. One smoking piece at a time. The supply of tar matters too. A barrel that has sat too cold may need coaxing before it can be portioned. The outside of the barrel feels damp, the hoops dark with age. When opened, the smell rises slowly, stronger near the surface. You scrape and draw what you can, knowing the bottom will be thicker, with sediment or settled heaviness that changes how the kettle behaves. In Tallinn's working yards, materials often arrive with stories no one tells fully. A barrel comes from a storehouse near the harbour, a bundle of wood from a village road, a brush from a shop where bristles, handles, and wire are sorted under lamplight. Your job gathers these quiet histories into heat. By evening, all of them smell of tar. There is no romance in breathing smoke all day, and we won't pretend there is. Your throat grows dry, your eyes redden. Your hair and cap carry the smell until even rain cannot fully loosen it. But the script of the day is not misery. It is endurance shaped by skill, a human steadiness beside a stubborn material. You learn small mercies. Stand upwind when you can. Keep a clean patch of cloth for your eyes if possible. Warm the handle before lifting, but not too much. Set buckets where feet will not find them. Drink when there is a pause, because heat and smoke take moisture from the body quietly. These lessons are plain, and plain lessons keep workers whole. As the light starts to lean westward, the work becomes less about new tasks and more about finishing each open one properly, because every unfinished seam will remember the night air. A final roof edge waits along a low building near the back of the yard. It is not a fine building, only a storage place with a patched roof and a door that swells in wet weather. But the goods inside matter to someone, and rain does not care whether it falls through a grand roof or a humble one. So you lift the bucket and go. The ladder here is shorter, rougher, with one rung smoothed by many boots. You test it before climbing, because habit is a form of kindness toward the body. The bucket is half full, which means easier to lift and easier to swing. If you forget yourself, you do not forget. You climb slowly, with the handle warm against your palm. On the roof, the air is colder. The sun, if it has shown itself at all, is already losing confidence. You kneel on a folded sack to spare your knees from the boards, though the damp comes through anyway. The seam runs along a place where the roof meets a small upright wall. Dust, grit, old tar flakes, and bits of moss gather there. You scrape first. Tar laid over loose dirt is a promise made badly. The scraper rasps along the surface, lifting old black scales and grey grit. The sound is dry and intimate, close to your hand. You brush the line clear with short movements. Beneath the dirt, the old wood appears, dark from years of weather but still willing to hold work. Then the warm tar goes down. You dip, lift, and press. The first stroke drags, the second joins it, the third smooths a ridge left by the brush. Each movement has to overlap the last, because water loves a gap. The tar shines like wet night along the seam,
and the smell rises warm against the cooling air. You might hear laughter from the street while you work. Not loud laughter, just a few voices passing. Someone done with one errand and headed toward another. Life moves under the roofline as if roofs happen by themselves. You do not resent this. Most good work disappears into ordinary comfort. A dry room is supposed to feel unremarkable. That is one of the gentle truths of the Tallinn Tar Kettle Man's life. Your labor is most successful when it is forgotten, when no one puts a basin under a leak, when no one curses a damp corner, when stored flour stays dry, or firewood keeps its edge, or a bed beneath the roof remains untouched by rain. The reward is silence. Your knees complain when you stand. You straighten slowly, one hand on the roof, the other steadying the brush. The city is dimmer now, with smoke lying lower between buildings. The harbor cranes and masts make thin shapes against the sky. Somewhere, metal strikes metal in a slow-working rhythm, and the sound reaches you as a distant chime. You bring the bucket down with less tar than before, though what remains has begun to thicken around the sides. Back at the kettle, you scrape it in while there is still heat enough to reclaim it. Waste is disliked in every yard, but with tar, it is also inconvenient, because waste sticks, spreads, and hardens where it pleases. Better to return it to the mass. The fire is lower again. You decide whether another full heating is needed. This decision matters because ending the day badly can make tomorrow harder. Too much tar left hot and unattended is foolish. Too little heat, and the tools cannot be cleaned enough for use. You stand with the rod in hand and feel the whole afternoon narrowing toward its last tasks. A worker nearby asks if you will heat another small pot. You look at the sky, at the kettle, at the amount remaining, and at the man's face, which is tired in the same ordinary way as yours. The repair is small, he says. A corner near the door. You nod, because small repairs made now can prevent larger work when the next rain comes. So the day lengthens by one more careful measure. You stir, draw, fill a small pot, and carry it not far, only across the yard to a threshold where water has been creeping under a lower board. The air near the ground smells of mud, old straw, and cold stone. You crouch there, and your knees remember every roof, ladder, and bucket. This repair is low and plain. No view of Tallinn's towers. No harbour wind, only a door frame, a wet sill, a strip of wood, and the dark line where tar must go. You clean it as well as you can. The brush is awkward at that angle, but your hand finds a way. Warm tar fills the line, and the threshold looks settled again. Small jobs like this can be strangely satisfying. They ask no speech, they offer no performance. They simply need the right material in the right place, placed by someone patient enough to care about a corner. You finish the edge with the tip of the brush, wiping the excess onto a scrap rather than leaving it to catch someone's boot. The man thanks you with a nod. You answer the same way. Some yards run on nods more than words, especially late in the day when every sentence seems to cost more breath. You carry the pot back and feel its lightness, though your arm is too tired to celebrate it. The kettle waits, breathing softly above the coals, and as evening begins to gather in the colder corners of the yard, the work turns toward putting the day away without pretending the day has left no mark. You cannot simply walk from a tar kettle and call the work done. The fire must be managed. The remaining tar must be considered. Tools must be scraped while warmth still allows it. Buckets must be set where cooling tar will not glue them to the stones. The end of the day is a slow unwinding, and every turn of it has a reason. You begin with the brush. Its bristles are heavy and dark, holding more tar than they appear to hold. You draw it against the inside of the kettle, pressing carefully so the excess runs back into the warmth. The sound is thick and soft. The brush handle is slick in places, rough in others, and it smells of years of the same labor. A good brush is never fully clean, but it can be left usable. That is the difference that matters. You scrape the sides with a bit of wood, working out what you can before the tar cools hard in the base of the bristles. Then you lay it where it will not collect grit. Tomorrow, or the next day, someone will thank your tired hands without knowing it. The buckets come next. You warm the stubborn streaks just enough to loosen them. then scrape them downward, saving what can be saved. The metal rings faintly when the scraper touches a cleaner patch. Your fingers are clumsy now, thick from work and cold, but they still know how to move. The body often keeps faith after the mind begins to drift. The kettle's rim needs attention. Tar gathers there in hardened lips and ridges, and if ignored, those ridges break off later into the hot mass. You work around the edge slowly, prying loose what should not remain. Some pieces fall back into the kettle to be melted again. Others are too dirty and go aside. Black chips on a board near the ash. The smell at this hour is different. Less fresh heat, more cooling residue. It is heavier, duller, mixed with the smoke of coals and the wet evening air. Your coat has absorbed it so thoroughly that you can hardly tell where the yard's smell ends and yours begins. We stay close, because this is the hour when even familiar work feels a little far away. A Tallinn evening in the 1900s arrives with layers of sound. Wheels over stones, a door closing, a woman calling from an upper window. Harbour noises thinning but not gone. The small cough of a stove starting somewhere nearby. You hear them while you scrape, and each sound seems to belong to a life moving towards supper, lamplight, and rest. Your own rest is not here yet. The fire must be lowered safely. You spread the embers, not scattering them carelessly, but opening the heat so it dies in a controlled way. Red turns to deeper red, then to grey at the edges. A last piece of wood collapses inward with a soft sigh. The kettle keeps its heat long after the flame has lost its shape. If there is tar left for tomorrow, it must cool where it will be safe and covered. Dust, rain, and careless hands are all enemies of stored material. You fit the lid or covering as the yard allows. Sometimes iron, sometimes boards, sometimes a practical arrangement that no manual would admire but every worker understands. The point is to protect the substance from the night. You wipe the rod while it is still warm. Tar resists the rag, stretching and clinging. You twist slowly, drawing the blackness away in bands. The rod will remain stained, of course. Everything remains stained. But there is a difference between stained and neglected, and you have lived long enough in work to respect that difference. Your hands feel swollen when you flex them. Under the grime, the skin has been heated, chilled, smoked, and rubbed by handles. You may have a small burn you did not notice when it happened. You may find it later, when water touches it at home. For now, it is only one more sensation among many, another quiet note in the body's record. The hard part of the work is not always the dramatic thing people imagine. It is the accumulation, a little smoke in the eyes, a little weight in the wrist, a little cold in the cuffs, a little care needed every minute, a little tar where tar should not be. By evening, all those littles have become the day. And yet there is steadiness here. You can see what you have done. The roof seems dark and sealed, the threshold line filled, the tools scraped, the fire brought down, the kettle left in order. Some labor vanishes into paper or talk, but yours leaves black shining marks that dull slowly under the air and wait for weather. A boy returns to the gate, perhaps the same one from earlier, perhaps another with the same curious eyes. He looks at the kettle now that the fire is low, as if it has lost its mystery. You know better. Even cooling iron has lessons. Even finished work can burn the careless. You tell him gently to keep back from the rim. He asks whether the tar is heavy. You could laugh, but you do not. You say yes, it is heavy. Heavy in the bucket, heavy on the brush, heavy in the clothes by the end of the day. He considers this with seriousness, as children sometimes do when given a plain answer. Then he runs on, leaving the yard quieter behind him. The question stays with you for a moment. Tar is heavy. So is damp wool. So is a ladder after the 10th climb. So is responsibility when no one names it as such. But heaviness is not always sorrow. Sometimes it is simply the feel of real things in the hand, the world having weight and asking you to meet it. As the sky lowers further, the old city begins to glow in windows. Not brightly, not all at once, but here and there, with lamplight behind glass and firelight behind curtains. Your yard remains mostly grey, black, and ember red. The tar kettle sits like a dark little stove of its own, holding what warmth it can. You stand beside it, and your breath shows faintly. This is when you notice the sounds inside your own clothing. The creak of a stiff sleeve, the scrape of a tarred cuff against your coat, the soft knock of a tool handle at your side. After a day of outer noise, these small near sounds feel strangely intimate. They are the sounds of a worker returning to himself. You check the buckets one more time, not because you expect a surprise, but because checking is part of how the work ends. One is turned properly, one needs moving away from the path, one has a thick line near the rim that you scrape with the last patience you have. The dark curl falls away and lands on the board with a quiet tap. A man locks a shed nearby, the key turning with a dry metal click. He says something about weather tomorrow. You glance at the sky, low cloud perhaps, damp in the air. Tallinn often carries weather as a promise rather than an event, and workers learn to plan around promises. If rain comes, today's sealed places will begin their silent test. You do not stay to see that test. That is part of the work's humility. You prepare, you apply, you clean, and then you leave the rest to material, weather, and time. A seam either holds or asks for you again. A roof either sheds water or speaks through a stain on the ceiling. The city will tell you later. For now, the tools return to their places. The poker leans where it will be found. The scraper lies on a board, blackened but ready. The stirring rod rests away from the path. Each item is plain, and each item has earned its rest. Your hands move among them with the slow care of someone setting down a long sentence word by word. And when the yard is nearly in order, the day opens a softer space, where you can feel how much of yourself has been spent in keeping one dark kettle useful. You step away from the fire, and the cold comes back around you. It does not rush. It simply fills the space where heat had been. Your face cools first, then your hands, then the front of your coat. The warmth from the kettle remains behind you, but it is no longer yours to lean on. The shift is moving toward its end. The stones underfoot are uneven in a way your body knows without looking. You walk the yard once more, checking for spilled tar, loose embers, a bucket in the wrong place, or a rag too near the coals. This last round is quiet. No one praises it. No one waits for it, but tomorrow morning will be easier because you make it. In the corner, ash settles in the firebed. It has the soft grey look of spent heat, and when you nudge it, a little red still glows beneath. You leave it arranged safely, not buried in a heap where heat can linger unseen. The smell is now mostly ash and cooling iron, with the tar underneath like a deeper memory. The city beyond the yard has its own evening tar and smoke smell, spread thin across streets and roofs. Chimneys work, lamps are lit, horses steam faintly in the cold. Somewhere, bread comes from an oven, and the warm yeast smell moves briefly through the harsher air. You catch it, and it feels like kindness passing by without stopping. Your own supper may be simple. Soup, black bread, potatoes, fish if there is fish, tea if there is tea. You may eat with hands still faintly marked after washing, because some work sits deeper than the basin can reach. The taste of smoke may remain at the back of your mouth, softening only as the room warms around you. But before that, there is the walk from the yard. You fasten what needs fastening, lift what needs carrying, and feel the stiffness in your legs as soon as the work stops commanding them. A working body often waits until the end to speak clearly. Then it tells the truth all at once, through knees, wrists, shoulders, and the lower back. The Tallinn Tar Kettle Man's walk home is part of the job, though no one pays it as such. You carry the smell of the yard into narrow streets. The stones shine where evening damp has gathered. Lamps show their yellow halos in the mist, and footsteps arrive before figures do. Your boots are heavy, but they know the way. You pass buildings whose roofs may once have taken your tar, or may need it soon. You look at edges without meaning to, a sagging gutter, a dark patch under a chimney, a place where water might creep. Work changes how you see a city. Other people see facades, windows, signs, and doors. You see seams. This does not trouble you. It gives the streets a hidden map. Here, water will run. There, frost will lift an edge. Along that roof, smoke stains show where heat has passed for years. You know the city not only by names and corners, but by wear, damp, patched lines, and the patient labor of keeping weather outside. A cart passes close, and you step aside. The horse smells of sweat, leather, and stable straw, a warmer living smell after the mineral smoke of the yard. The driver nods without much interest. You nod back. Evening is full of these small acknowledgements, each one light as a hand laid briefly on the rail of the day. The sky over the harbor is dim, but not empty. Masts stand in dark lines. A gull turns once, then vanishes into the grey. The water is somewhere beyond the buildings, moving in its own cold rhythm, bringing damp into the city and carrying ships toward other coasts. Your tar has served ships before, and perhaps it will again. In older times, tar was tied closely to wooden vessels, rope, rigging, and the long effort to keep water from claiming what people built. Even in your city of changing materials, that memory remains in the smell. When warm tar rises from the kettle, it carries forests, shipyards, rooflines, and rain all at once. You may not say this aloud, but your body knows it. You turn into a narrower street, where walls hold the day's chill. A window opens above, and a little household sound spills out. A dish set down, a voice answering another voice. The sound closes again. You continue under it, still wrapped in smoke, feeling how the public world gives way to private rooms one lit square at a time. And as night approaches fully, the hardness of the day begins to soften into memory, though the smell of tar remains with you like a dark thread sewn through the coat. At the wash basin, warm water is a luxury if you have it, and cold water is still better than nothing. You work soap into your hands, though the soap struggles. The water clouds quickly, grey at first, then darker where soot loosens. Tar near the nails holds on. You scrape gently, knowing too much force will only make the skin sore. The smell rises again when water touches your hands. It is different indoors, stronger somehow, because the small room has less air to share it. Smoke, tar, wool, and iron come awake under the steam. You bend closer to the basin, and the muscles in your neck complain. Still, the water feels good. It tells the body that the fire is behind you. If your sleeves have hardened spots, you leave them. They are work clothes now, and work clothes have their own fate. Perhaps they hang near a door or in a corner where the smell can do the least harm. The fabric keeps the shape of your elbows. The cuffs are dark. The coat looks tired in the same way you feel tired. Supper asks little of you. That is a mercy. You sit, and the chair receives your weight with a faint creak. Warm food smells different from the yard, even when your hands bring traces of smoke to the table. Bread feels firm under your fingers. A spoon warms in broth. For the first time in hours, your attention does not have to watch flame. Still, the day moves through your mind in slow pieces. The first kindling, the reluctant tar, the roof seam, the shed, the threshold, the boy asking about weight. None of it comes back as a story with sharp edges. It comes back as sensation, as heat on the face, a handle in the palm, smoke turning with the wind. You may hear rain begin later, soft against the window or roof. If it comes, you listen without fully meaning to. A tar kettle man listens to rain differently. You think of the seams you sealed, and the places where water will try them. There is no anxiety in it tonight, only a quiet professional wondering. The mind touching its work once more before sleep. The rain, if it falls, makes the city smell of stone and soot. It darkens the lanes and cools the last ash in yards like yours. On roofs, it beads and runs, looking for paths. Where your tar has set well, water moves past without entering. It does not thank you. It simply goes on, and that is enough. In bed, the body remembers the day more strongly than the mind does. Your shoulder may ache when you turn. Your fingers may curl slightly, as if still holding a bucket handle. The smell in your hair may linger on the pillow. These are not grand sufferings, but they are real, and they explain why the work was hard in ways a passerby might never guess.
Yet there can be pride in such tiredness. Not loud pride, not pride that asks to be seen, a quieter kind, rooted in knowing that the kettle was kept, the fire managed, the tar prepared, and the city made a little more weatherproof by your hands. Sometimes that is all a day needs to be. The next morning will come with cold iron again. That is the shape of repetitive work. Nothing stays solved forever. Roofs age, weather returns, tools stiffen, fire must be remade from ash and wood, but repetition does not make the work meaningless. It gives it rhythm, and rhythm can carry a person through many years. We can imagine you before dawn again, though not too quickly. Let the night stay where it is for a while. Let the yard rest under its thin damp cover. Let the kettle cool fully, black and silent beside the stones. Let the tools wait, stained and ordinary, in the darkness before another working day asks for them. When morning returns, perhaps frost lies on the boards. The canvas over the wood is stiff at the edges. Your breath shows as you enter the yard, and the sky is the color of pewter over Tallinn's roofs. You lift the canvas, choose the driest pieces, and begin the old arrangement of kindling, air, and patience. The kettle waits with yesterday's tar set hard inside it. You touch the rim and feel the cold through your glove. For a moment, nothing in the yard seems willing to move. Then the match catches, the shavings curl, and a small flame begins its careful eating. The day starts again, in the smallest possible way. That may be the deepest hardship of the Tallinn Tar Kettle Man. The work must be started from cold so often. Not only the iron, not only the tar, but the body, the hands, the will to stand again in smoke and damp air. Each morning asks you to believe in heat before heat has arrived. So you build it. The flame grows and the first smoke lifts. You step close, shield it from a wind slipping through the gate, and feed it without hurry. The tar will not soften because you wish it to. It will soften because fire is tended, because time passes, because you stir when stirring is needed. The lesson is plain, and plain lessons often last. A worker comes in rubbing his hands. Another follows with a coil of cord over one shoulder. The yard wakes around your small fire, and once again the kettle becomes the warm center of the morning. Someone asks whether the tar will be ready soon. You look at the black surface and say, after a while, it is the answer the kettle has taught you. The first hour repeats yesterday, but never exactly. The wind is different. The wood is different. Your hands are differently tired. The tar at the bottom may have settled into a thicker layer. The sky may hold snow or rain or only the threat of both. Repetition is not sameness, though from a distance it can look that way. You stir and feel a hard place release near the side. The rod sinks a little deeper. A glossy crescent appears where the tar has begun to soften against the warmed iron. You move slowly, letting heat travel inward. There is no good in tearing cold tar apart before it is ready. Some materials, like some thoughts, must be warmed before they can move. The smoke drifts upward and catches in your cap. It threads through your scarf. It makes your eyes narrow. You could complain, and perhaps some mornings you do, but mostly you accept it as the weather of the kettle. Every trade has its weather. The fisherman has water and wind. The mason has dust and stone. You have smoke and tar. By the time the first bucket is ready, the city has begun its ordinary noise. Hooves on stone, doors opening, a distant bell, a cart axle needing grease, voices in Estonian, German, Russian, and other sounds of a port city layered by trade and rule and daily survival. You do not need to sort them. They wash around the yard while your hand closes on the handle. This morning's work may take you near the harbor. The bucket is covered for the short journey, though the smell finds its way out. You walk with another man carrying tools, and together you pass warehouses, stacked timber, ropes and barrels. The air grows saltier as you near the water. Gulls wheel and cry above the roofs with their usual thin impatience. A small vessel needs attention along a seam, or perhaps a dockside structure has a timber joint that takes spray in rough weather.
The details matter, but the principle is familiar. Water has found a place to work. You bring heated tar to answer it. The harbor boards are damp underfoot, smelling of salt, fish, rope, and old pitch. Here the wind is more restless than in the yard. It comes across open water and slips under your coat. The tar cools faster in the pot, and you must work closer to the useful heat. You crouch beside the timber, feeling the boards through your knees, and stir the small pot once before using it. The surface has already thickened in the cold air. The brush meets rough wood. Tar presses into grain and seam, leaving a dark band against the weathered surface. You work carefully, because harbor wood is often uneven, chewed by use, swollen by damp, and scarred by iron. The smell of warm tar mingles with salt water, and that old pairing feels almost older than the city itself. A rope nearby is stiff from previous coatings, dark and slightly glossy where hands have handled it for years. Coating rope with tar helps resist rot and weather, though it makes the rope rougher and leaves its smell on everything it touches. You look at it and understand the logic immediately. In a wet world, dryness has to be made and remade by hand. The harbor workers talk around you in practical fragments. Hold this. Move that. Not there. Wait until it takes. You answer when needed. Mostly you keep your eyes on the seam, pressing, smoothing, checking for gaps. The wind tries to cool your work too quickly, and you lean closer, using your body as a small shield. Your coat brushes a post and picks up a smear of old blackness. You notice it without emotion. The coat had long ago given up any claim to being separate from the trade. Still, you shift more carefully after that. A Tar Kettle Man may accept dirt, but he does not invite unnecessary mess. There is a difference, and the difference is discipline. The harbor has its own kind of quiet. Even when busy, water slaps softly under boards. Ropes creak. Wood knocks. A gull cries, then another answers farther off. Men work with pauses between words, because wind and water already speak enough. In that soundscape, your brush makes a small wet rasp along the timber, steady and close. When the seam is coated, you wait a little, watching the surface lose some of its shine. Tar must set enough before it is disturbed. The waiting is not empty. You use it to clean the brush edge, adjust the pot, warm your hands near what heat remains, and look along the line for places the first pass missed. Nearly every job has a missed place if you look honestly. You find one near a bolt. The tar has bridged over a tiny hollow without filling it. You press the brush in at an angle and feel it give. The hollow darkens. Now water has less invitation there. It is a small victory, too small for words, but your hand recognizes it. By late morning, you return toward the yard with the pot lighter and the wind behind you. The city smells different away from the water. More chimney smoke, more bread, more horses, more damp stone. Your boots bring harbor grit back with them. The pot knocks against your leg in a dull rhythm, and your arm hangs tired but steady. The kettle is waiting, and the fire needs attention. It always does. You set the pot down, lift the poker, and open the coals. The heat flashes against your face. For a moment, after the harbor wind, it feels almost generous. Then smoke rolls up, and the old stinging returns. Work gives and takes in the same breath. You add wood and stir the main kettle again. The tar answers more easily now, warmed through by the morning's patience. It turns slowly, glossy in the middle, thick near the edges. You draw the rod in broad circles, then smaller ones because motion must follow the shape of the mass. Too much haste only splashes and wastes. Another worker brings news of a leak in a warehouse roof. Not a bad one, he says, though men often say this when they mean it is bad enough to require you. The warehouse holds sacks that should not get damp. Grain perhaps, or flour, or goods waiting for shipment. Whatever they are, water has no business finding them. You prepare a fresh bucket. This time the path leads through a larger doorway and into a dim interior where the smell changes completely. Inside, the air holds dust, burlap, old wood, and the faint, dry scent of stored goods. Your warm bucket seems almost too strong in that enclosed place, sending tar smell ahead of you like a dark announcement. Light enters through high windows and cracks in boards. Dust turns in the beams of it. Somewhere above, a drop has marked its path down a post, leaving a narrow, darker line. You follow the sign upward with your eyes. There is the work, hidden from the street, hidden from anyone who does not know how to read damp. A ladder is brought. You test it, always. Then you climb with the bucket waiting below until you are ready to receive it. The air near the roof is colder than expected. Drafts move through openings you cannot see. The boards creak under careful weight. You take the bucket, set it secure, and begin cleaning the place where the patch will go. Old warehouse dust clings to everything. It softens edges and hides cracks until your scraper reveals them. The smell of disturbed dust rises dry in your nose, then is overtaken by warm tar when the brush begins. You press the coating into the joint, slow and firm, hearing muffled movements below as men shift sacks or tools out of the way. This work feels more enclosed than roof work outside. No city view, no open sky, only beams, dust, the dark line of the seam, and the bucket's heat beside you. The quiet is close. Your breath sounds louder. The brush sounds louder. Even the tar settling into the crack seems to make a sound, though perhaps that is only your attention growing finer. Hard work can narrow the world. That is not always a bad thing. For a while, there is no empire, no harbor, no politics, no price of fuel, no coming winter, only the seam under your hand and the need to make it right. The mind rests inside the task, and the task becomes a kind of shelter. When you finish, you remain a few breaths longer to check the edges. The patch must overlap sound material. The surface must not be left in ridges where water can catch. You smooth what needs smoothing, scrape excess from the brush, and look once more at the damp trail below. If the next rain proves you wrong, you will hear of it. For now, the line is sealed. Down below, the air feels warmer. The bucket is almost empty. The men are already thinking of the next task, because workdays move by necessity more than ceremony. You carry the tools out, and outside the yard light seems broad after the dim roof space. Your eyes adjust slowly. The kettle smoke appears almost blue against the cold air. By midday, your hands have entered that state where they are both tired and precise. They may tremble slightly at rest, but once they take up the rod or brush, they remember. This is another quiet truth of labor. The body can be weary and skilled at the same time. Weariness does not erase knowledge. You take bread again, standing near a wall where the wind is weaker. The bread is dense, a little sour, and good. You chew slowly. Someone has poured tea into a tin cup, and you hold it carefully because the warmth feels clean compared with the kettle's heat. Steam rises from it, carrying a mild smell that sits gently over the smoke in your clothes. The pause is brief, but it has depth. Your shoulders lower. Your eyes stop searching for smoke signals in the tar. The city's sounds blur into one soft background. For a few minutes, you are not lifting, stirring, scraping, or watching. You are simply a tired worker with warm tea in hand, and the day allows it. Then the kettle calls again, not with a voice, but with need. The fire has fallen. The surface has thickened. A skin has begun at the edge. You finish the last of the bread, set the cup aside, and return. The movement is almost automatic, and there is comfort in that too. You know where you belong in the yard. The afternoon ahead will bring its own slow demands. Perhaps more roof seams, perhaps a cart needing a waterproofed cover edge, perhaps timber ends to coat before they are stacked where damp can reach them. A tar kettle man is often asked to make things last longer, and lasting longer is rarely glamorous. It is brushing darkness onto vulnerable places. Timber ends are quiet work. You set boards on supports and coat the cut ends where the grain drinks deeply. The tar soaks in at first, then begins to sit on the surface. Fresh cut wood smells clean, pale, and living, while hot tar smells old, dark, and preserved. Where they meet, the scent is strange and satisfying, like the future being closed against weather. You work board after board, dip, brush, turn, dip, brush, turn. The boards are stacked aside to dry, each end darkened. The repetition is strong enough to lull the mind if you let it, so you keep a small watch inside yourself. You check coverage, you check drips, you check that no board is set where dirt will adhere too thickly. Someone might say this is dull work. Perhaps it is, but dullness can hold a gentle place in the world. Not every task must sparkle. Some tasks are meant to be done steadily, with enough attention to prevent trouble and not enough drama to disturb the afternoon. The boards receive their coating, and the stack grows slowly. Your back bends, straightens, bends again. The brush grows heavier with each dip. Tar begins to gather near the ferrule, and you scrape it off against the bucket rim. The air around the work smells of resin and damp sawdust. A small curl of wood shaving sticks to your sleeve. You leave it there until your hand is free. The Tallinn sky thickens with cloud. Light seems to come from everywhere and nowhere, flat and pale. This kind of light makes the tar look even darker. It makes the boards look almost yellow before they are coated. It makes the smoke from the kettle spread sideways in a low veil, so the far side of the yard appears softened and distant. You hear the church bell again, though you do not count it closely. Workers often know time by appetite, light and the stage of the job more than by bells. Still, the bell marks the day for the city, and the sound moves over roofs you may have patched, past walls you pass each morning, through air scented with coal smoke, cooking and damp wool. The afternoon does not hurry, it thickens. It gathers small tasks into itself and asks you to keep moving through them. You coat the final timber end, set the brush down, and flex your fingers. The glove sticks slightly when you open your hand. You peel it loose with your other fingers, slow and careful, because tar has entered the seam. There is still heat in the kettle. There is still material enough for one more job if one more job appears, and one often does. You look toward the gate when footsteps approach. A man from a nearby building asks for help with a gutter joint where water runs down the wall. His cap is wet at the brim, though no rain has fallen recently. Damp finds its own way. You go because the kettle is ready, and because such requests are the shape of your trade. The gutter is not high, but it is awkward. A ladder set on uneven stones, a narrow reach, a joint fouled by old leaves and black grit. You clean first, always clean first. Wet leaves smell sour when disturbed, and the gutter metal chills your fingers through the glove. The tar must be worked into a joint that does not want to receive it. You use a smaller tool, more like a paddle than a brush, pressing the warm material along the seam. Some of it slips. You catch what you can with the edge and return it. The man below holds the ladder and says nothing, which is useful. Silence can be a good assistant. From the ladder, you can see a slice of street. People pass close beneath, unaware of the little repair above them. A woman's shawl is dark green. A cart carries sacks under a stained cover. A dog noses at a doorway, then trots on. Life goes below while you seal the place where rain has been writing its complaint down the wall. The gutter repair is finished with a final smoothing stroke. You do not make it beautiful. You make it serviceable. Beauty in such work is mostly the absence of loose edges, gaps and waste. You climb down carefully, and the man looks up at the joint as if trying to decide whether he understands it. He gives a small nod. That is enough. Back at the yard, the day's second tiredness arrives. The first tiredness was muscular, loud in the shoulders and hands. This one is quieter. It comes into the eyes, into the decision-making, into the part of you that remembers where everything should go. This is when tools are misplaced, and lids are forgotten, unless you slow down deliberately. So you slow down. You give each movement a little more room. The bucket is placed, not dropped. The rod is leaned, not tossed. The wood is selected, not grabbed. Tired workers often need fewer movements, not faster ones. The old men know this. They seem slow, but they waste almost nothing. Perhaps you learned that from one of them, years before. A man with smoke in every seam of his coat, who could judge a kettle by standing near it with his hands behind his back. He might have said very little, but his silences were full of instruction. When he moved, you watched. When he stopped you, you remembered why. Now younger hands may watch you the same way. They see the angle of the ladle, the distance from the fire, the way you sniff once and step back before smoke thickens. They may not know they are learning. You may not know you are teaching. Work passes itself along through repeated gestures, often without ceremony. The kettle continues to give heat. That is what it does when treated well. Its iron sides hold the fire's memory. The tar inside keeps its dark patience. You stir again, because leaving it unstirred feels wrong even in a pause. The rod moves smoothly now, and the surface folds into itself with the slow grace of heavy cloth. A faint drizzle begins, so fine it almost seems imagined. You feel it first on your face, a cool speckle over smoke-warmed skin. The yardstones darken in small points that join slowly. Someone pulls the canvas more securely over the wood. Someone curses softly, not with drama, but with the everyday irritation of weather arriving when hands are full. Rain and hot tar require care. Water in the wrong place can spit and startle the hand. You cover what must be covered, move what must be moved, and keep the kettle protected as best the yard allows. The drizzle is light, but it changes the mood of everything. Surfaces grow slick, smoke lowers, the air smells more strongly of stone. The work does not stop at once, it adjusts. Outdoor spreading may wait. Indoor or sheltered tasks may continue. Tools are gathered closer. The fire is watched more carefully. You become aware of every drop that falls near the kettle, every damp board, every place where water and heat might meet too suddenly. This is another reason the job was hard in Tallinn. The climate has moods of dampness that do not always announce themselves with proper rain. Mist, thaw, sea air, drizzle, melting frost, wet fog, and cold condensation all become part of your working day. A dry spell is not merely pleasant, it is an opportunity. The drizzle softens after a while, though the stones remain wet. Steam rises faintly from a warm splash near the firebed. You smell wet ash now, a flat mineral smell under the tar. Your gloves feel heavier. The canvas over the wood shines in the dim light. The whole yard seems to lower its voice. You stand near the kettle and let the heat reach your hands. Not too close, just enough. The day has given you roofs, timber, harbor boards, a gutter joint, and all the ordinary tending between them. There will still be cleaning. There will still be closing. But for this small moment, while drizzle threads through smoke, you simply stand and keep watch. The tar surface moves when you stir it, and a reflection of the grey sky wavers there briefly before breaking. It is a strange little mirror, dark and unreliable, showing almost nothing clearly. Yet your whole day has been held in that darkness. Fire, weather, weight, roofs, water, and human patience, all turning slowly in the black bowl of the kettle. When the drizzle ends, the yard does not brighten. It only stops receiving new drops. That is enough. You scrape the wet edge of a board with your boot, move it near a shelter, and check the covered wood the cloth has held. The fuel beneath smells dry enough. Tomorrow will need it, because every day begins again with flame. The final tasks gather around you once more, not as an ending, but as another part of the cycle. Scrape the brush, clear the rim, set the bucket, ease the fire, cover the material, look for spills, let nothing hot remain where a careless step might find it. The order is familiar, and because it is familiar, it is soothing even when you are tired. A worker sweeping nearby sends damp grit into little ridges along the stones. The broom sounds rough, steady, almost like distant surf. You hear it while you clean the ladle, and the two rhythms sit together, scrape and sweep, scrape and sweep. The yard is putting itself away through many hands, each doing a small necessary thing. Your rag has almost no clean surface left. You fold it once more anyway, finding a corner that can still serve. The tar smears, then lifts. Not all of it. Enough. Enough is a word every practical worker understands. Perfect cleanliness is for objects that have never stood beside a kettle. Usable cleanliness is for tomorrow. The fire's red has gone deeper. You can feel less heat now unless you stand very near. The kettle cools slowly, giving back the day in a softer form. Smoke thins to a faint thread. The air smells of wet stone, old tar, and tired wood. Somewhere beyond the yard, someone laughs at something small and human, and the sound passes without disturbing anything. You lift the last bucket and turn it to its place. Your wrist protests, then settles. The bucket lands with a dull metal sound. You check that it will not collect rain if the weather turns again. A bucket left wrong becomes a problem by morning, and morning has enough problems of its own, so you turn it properly. The younger worker, if he is still there, watches less restlessly now. The day has taught him some of its weight. His face has a smear of soot near one cheekbone. He looks at the tools, then at you, perhaps waiting for dismissal, perhaps only tired. You tell him to bring the scraper in, and he does. Small responsibilities are how a trade enters the hands. Together you set the last things under cover. The motion is quiet. No one makes ceremony of it. Yet there is a tenderness in shared practical work at day's end, when voices are low and everyone is too tired to pretend. A tool handed correctly feels like respect. A path cleared without being asked feels like care. The Tallinn evening closes around the yard again, and the kettle sits darker now, no longer the urgent center, but still holding a little warmth in its iron. You rest your hand near it, not touching, just feeling the heat that remains. It is less than before, but real. The day leaves like that, not all at once, but in warmth fading from metal. There will be other days when frost makes the tar stubborn beyond patience. Other days when summer heat turns the yard close and heavy, and the smoke seems to sit on your tongue. Other days when a barrel is poor, a brush fails, a roof is awkward, or rain arrives too soon. The hardship is not one story, it is a long pattern, but there are also days when the fire catches cleanly. Days when the tar warms evenly, when the brush moves well, when the sealed seam lies smooth and dark under a steady sky. Days when your body is tired but not defeated, and the walk home carries a quiet satisfaction. A difficult job can still contain good hours. We can remain with that thought as the yard dims, not forcing it into a lesson, just letting it sit beside the kettle, plain and warm. You were the one who kept the fire. You were the one who read the smoke. You were the one who carried the dark weight carefully across wet stones, again and again, because the work required it. The old city continues beyond you. Roofs hold, gutters drip where they should. Harbor timbers take spray. Stored boards wait under cover. Sheds remain dry for another night. None of these things announces your name, and perhaps that is fitting. The Tallinn Tar Kettle Man works in traces, in sealed edges and darkened seams, in the quiet absence of leaks. Your hands lower at your sides. The gloves are stiff. The cuffs are marked. The air has cooled enough that your breath shows plainly now. A final thread of smoke comes from the firebed, then bends toward the gate. You watch it go, and for a moment it seems to carry the whole day with it, thinning into the damp evening air. The next task is simply to walk, but even walking has its ritual after work like this. You check your boots for clinging tar before leaving the yard. You knock one sole lightly against stone. A small bit of grit falls away. Then you step into the lane, where lamplight has begun to gather, and the city's evening sounds draw you forward. The street is slick after the drizzle. Reflections tremble in shallow places between stones. A cart passes slowly, wheels making a softened clatter. Somewhere a shutter closes. Somewhere a kettle of another kind sings inside a room, bright and domestic, and the thought of that clean steam feels far from the black iron kettle you have tended all day. Still, both kettles belong to human life. One warms tea, one warms tar, one belongs to a table, the other to a yard. Both ask for watching. Both change what is placed inside them. The comparison might make you smile faintly if you have enough tiredness left for smiling. Work often makes relatives of things that seem unrelated. You pass under a wall where water darkens the lower stones. Your eyes find the line automatically. That place may need attention someday. Not tonight, Tonight it is only part of the city's damp breathing. You let it go and keep walking, your shoulders rounded slightly against the cold, your coat carrying its dark smell homeward. A person passing close may notice the tar on you and know your trade without asking. There are jobs that announce themselves. Baker by flour, smith by soot and iron, fisherman by salt and scale, tar kettle man by smoke and black shine at the cuffs. The city reads its workers through these marks, even when no one speaks. At a corner, you pause to let a cart turn. The horse's breath clouds before its muzzle. The driver's lantern swings gently, making the wet street glow and darken by turns. Your bucket hand, though empty, flexes as if remembering the handle. The body carries invisible tools after the visible ones are put away. When the cart has passed, you cross. The stones are uneven, but your feet know them. Somewhere ahead there is a warmer room, or at least a less cold one, and a place to set down the body. Behind you, the yard cools. The kettle sits covered. The tar rests. The repaired seams begin their first night of waiting. The day has not ended completely, because work remains in the senses after labor stops. You smell it when the wind shifts around your collar. You feel it in the tack of one glove against another. You taste smoke faintly when you swallow. You hear the fires crackle in memory, even though the street offers only wheels, footsteps, and distant voices. And as you move through Tallinn's evening, the work travels with you in that quiet way, not asking to be admired, only asking to be carried a little farther before sleep. Before sleep, there is still the small business of entering a room without bringing the whole yard inside with you. You pause near the threshold and look down at your boots, dark along the edges, gritty from the lane, marked by work that will not be fully left behind. A little mud has joined the tar near one heel, and you scrape it gently against a stone, because even tiredness can make room for care. Inside, the air is close and warmer, though not soft enough to erase the cold from your bones. The smell of food meets the smell of smoke in your coat, and for a moment the two sit together uneasily. You hang the coat where it belongs, away from bedding and clean cloth, and the stiff sleeves hold the shape of your arms as if the day was still inside them. Your hands feel lighter without it, but not clean yet. The basin waits with water that may have cooled more than you'd like. You lower your fingers into it, and the first touch wakes every scrape and small burn you earned without noticing. Soap moves over your palms, grey foam gathering around the creases. Tar near the nails resists, as it always does, clinging with a patience almost equal to your own. You rub slowly, not harshly, letting warmth and time do what force cannot. Even after washing, the scent remains. It hides near the cuticles, in the tiny lines of skin, under the faint roughness left by tools and rope handles. When you lift your hand toward your face, you smell the yard again. The kettle, the wet stones, the cold roof air, the smoke that seemed to choose you again and again. It is not pleasant exactly, but it is familiar. And familiarity has its own comfort. Supper is a quieter kind of work, spoon lifted, bread broken, cup held between palms. You eat slowly because your body asks for slowness now, and because no one is waiting for a bucket to be carried. The room sounds small after the yard. A chair leg shifts. A dish touches the table. Outside, a cart passes over wet cobbles, softened by the walls between you and the street. Your mind does not speak much while you eat. It drifts through practical images. The covered kettle, the last ember, the gutter joint, the roof seam. The bucket turned so rain will not gather in it. These things pass through you like a slow inspection. You do not summon them. They come because a worker's mind often continues its round after the hands have stopped moving. Later, when the room has dimmed and the city has settled deeper into evening, you may hear water from a roof edge or drain. A faint dripping can bring back the whole day. Not as worry, not quite, more as recognition. Water is always working too, patiently, persistently, asking questions of every joint and seam. You lie still and trust. For now, the dark lines your brush left behind. And when sleep comes near, it does not arrive like a door closing all at once, but like the fire lowering under the kettle, red becoming grey, while the iron keeps a little warmth. The next day may begin with mist so thick the roofs seem to have moved closer together. Tallinn can hold morning fog in its streets like a secret, softening corners and making distant bells seem wrapped in wool. You step out before full light, and your breath joins the mist at once. The stones are damp again. The air smells of sea, ash, stale smoke, and cold water. At the yard, the kettle is exactly where you left it, which is a small satisfaction. The cover has held. No one has knocked a bucket into the path. The wood under the canvas is dry enough. You notice these things the way another man might notice coins counted correctly. Good order is quiet wealth for someone whose day begins with fire. You lift the cover and see the tar set dark and still. Its surface has lost yesterday's gloss. Dust has not spoiled it, and rain has not reached it. You lean closer, and the cold smell rises slowly, less sweet than when warm, more like old rope, storage and soot. The iron rim is cold enough to bite through a glove if you hold it too long. You let go. Kindling comes first, and once again you build the day from small pieces. Shavings, splinters, chips, then narrow sticks, arranged so air can move and flame can climb. This beginning has the humility of all beginnings. The kettle is heavy, the tar is hard, the morning is damp, and still the first useful thing is a fragile flame cupped against the wind. You strike the match and guard it with your hand. The sulfur smell flares briefly, sharp and modern against the older smells of wood and tar. The shaving catches along one curled edge, then another, and the fire begins to make its small noises. A little warmth touches your fingers. You feed it slowly, because the fire must be invited into strength rather than forced. As the flame grows, the yard emerges from mist in pieces. A stack of boards, a wall dark with damp, a coil of rope, the outline of a ladder leaning where it should. The kettle sits at the center, still cold above the young fire, like a black bell waiting for heat. You stand close, and the first smoke finds your coat, as though greeting an old friend. This morning, a carpenter wants tar for the lower edge of a timber frame that will face weather. He arrives early, impatient only because his own work depends on yours. You nod toward the kettle, and he understands enough to wait. No amount of wishing will hurry cold tar into good tar. The fire will take its own time, and every worker in the yard must bend around that truth. While the kettle warms, you prepare what can be prepared. You set the bucket near the heat. You check the brush and trim away one broken clump of bristle hardened from the day before. You scrape old flakes from the rim. You sort rags, saving the least ruined one for cleaner handling. These little tasks make patience active, and active patience is easier to bear. The tar begins to soften at the sides. You see the first shine appear, a narrow, wet-looking ring where iron and heat have done their patient work. The stirring rod meets resistance, then a slight yielding. You do not fight the center yet. You work the edge, drawing the softened part inward, letting heat enter by small agreements. There is wisdom in not forcing a stubborn thing. The carpenter returns after a while, sees the movement in the kettle, and says nothing. That silence tells you he has judged the weight almost over. His timber frame lies on trestles nearby, pale wood against the grey morning, smelling of fresh cuts and sap. The lower edge will drink tar deeply, and you will need to keep the coating even, not too thin, not wastefully thick. You fill a shallow pot rather than a full bucket. The tar falls with a heavy ribboning sound, warm and glossy, and the smell opens into the mist. The carpenter lifts one end of the frame while you set the pot down beside it. Together you turn the piece so the vulnerable edge faces upward. It is ordinary cooperation, wordless and exact. The brush moves along the grain, and the pale wood darkens under your hand. At first, the tar sinks in greedily, leaving the surface less shiny than expected. You give it another pass. The second layer settles more evenly, and the edge becomes black, sealed, and faintly lustrous. Your wrist follows the line steadily. while your other hand rests against the wood to guide the pressure. Fresh timber and hot tar make a smell that feels like a meeting of two seasons. One is the growing season hidden in the wood, sun and sap and the clean cut of a saw. The other is the preserving season, smoke and fire and weatherproofing against rain. You stand between them, brush in hand, helping one become ready for the other. The carpenter turns the frame again, and you coat the next edge. He watches for missed places, not unkindly, and you welcome the second pair of eyes. Good workers do not mind being helped toward good work. He points once near a knot where the tar has pulled thin, and you return with the brush, pressing the material into the uneven little hollow. By the time the frame is done, your fingers are warm from the pot and stiff from holding the brush. The carpenter thanks you with a practical nod and moves the piece aside to set. You scrape the pot back into the kettle, saving what has not taken sawdust or grit. The morning has found its pace now. Mist still hangs over the yard, but the work has entered daylight. The difficulty of being a Tallinn Tar Kettle Man is partly that every material changes in your hands. Wood drinks, metal chills, rope frays, tar thickens, fire rises and falls, weather interferes. You can never simply repeat without seeing what is different. The routine is steady, but the details shift like fog between buildings, and as the mist thins into a pale late morning, the yard widens around you again, and the next call comes from the place where rope is kept under a low lean-to. The rope has been used near water, and it carries a smell of salt, hemp, damp storage, and old handling. Some lines are already dark from previous dressing. Others look pale and dry in places, rough where fibers have lifted. Tarred rope resists wetness better, but handling it is never delicate work. It stains hands, stiffens the line, and leaves its own memory in the air. You warm a smaller batch for the rope work. It should be workable but not scorching, thick enough to cling and thin enough to enter the outer fibers. The men stretch the rope between posts, and you move along it with a brush and rag, coating, turning, pressing the dark material into the lay. The rope twists under your hand like a long sleeping muscle. The texture is different from wood. Wood offers a surface. Rope offers many small surfaces braided into one. Tar catches in the valleys between strands, shines on the ridges, and stains the loose fibers first. You work slowly, because a rushed rope coating leaves pale spaces that will drink water later. The rag helps spread the excess and push it inward. Your gloves grow tacky almost at once. Each time you lift your hand, it clings a little to the rope, then releases with a small sound. The smell is strong here, close to your face because the rope is raised at chest height. You breathe through your mouth for a while, tasting smoke and resin. A worker beside you turns the line steadily, giving you a new side to coat. This is not work for fine clothing or clean pride. Tar dots the ground beneath. It marks the posts. It finds the back of your wrist where the glove has shifted. But when the line is finished, it looks darker, heavier, more prepared for its life near wet boards and harbor air. You run your eyes along it, searching for pale breaks in the coverage. You find a few. There are always a few. You return to them, dabbing and smoothing. The other worker holds the rope still while you press tar into a stubborn spot near a splice. The splice is thick, complex, full of little hiding places where water could settle. You treat it patiently, almost tenderly, because complicated places need more care, not less. When the rope is done, it must hang without touching dirt. That requires a little rearrangement of the yard. A barrel is moved. A board is set across two supports. Someone complains mildly, then helps. The rope hangs in a dark line under the lean-to, smelling powerfully of tar and hemp, while the first slow drops fall from it onto scraps placed below. You clean your gloves as well as you can, though they are less glove now than working surface. The rag pulls away in strings. Your fingers flex inside, feeling the tack through leather and cloth. The rope job leaves you sticky in a different way than roof work. It is closer, more enveloping, a dark handling rather than a dark spreading. The kettle, meanwhile, has cooled slightly during the rope work. You return to it and feed the fire, adjusting the wood, and opening the coals. Heat rises again. Welcome on your damp sleeves. The tar inside has formed a thicker skin at the edge. You break it gently with the rod and fold it back into the warmer center. A yard owner might count the rope as a small task, but your body does not count by labels. It counts grip, reach, bending, smoke, and how many times the hand had to close and open against resistance. The rope has taken its share from you. You feel it in the forearm, a deep tiredness that will appear again later when you lift a cup. The late morning brings a brief clearance of sky. For a few minutes, light touches the upper walls and turns wet stone silver. Steam rises from places where warmth meets damp. The kettle smoke climbs straighter. Everyone in the yard seems to notice without saying anything. A little cleaner light can change the whole mood of a working day. You take that light as help. You check the rope once more, now easier to see along its length. You inspect the timber frame edges. You look at the buckets waiting near the kettle. The tar surface shines in the clearer air, black with brown glints at the rim. It looks almost beautiful, though you would not say that too loudly among practical men. Beauty in this work comes unexpectedly. It comes in a smooth sealed line, a well-managed fire, a rope darkened evenly, a roof patch that lies flat under rain. It comes in the way repeated movements become graceful because they have become economical. You do not decorate the world. You preserve its edges, and sometimes preservation has a quiet beauty of its own. By midday, the weather has shifted again, as weather does in a coastal city, and the air carries a sharper cold that makes every pause shorter than you hoped. You eat standing under the lean-to, where the newly tarred rope hangs nearby and perfumes the whole space. Bread, a little butter or fat, perhaps a piece of fish wrapped in paper, all of it touched by the scent of the trade before it reaches your mouth. You chew and watch the yard. The fire needs nothing for a few breaths. That is enough time to eat. The cup in your hand is warm. You hold it with both palms, because warmth received without labor feels almost luxurious. The drink may be tea or something simple and hot, darkened by leaves, herbs, or whatever the household has made available. Its steam rises cleanly, and you lower your face toward it, letting it soften the smoke at the back of your throat. Someone tells a small story nearby about a roof patched last winter, where the owner blamed the tar and then admitted the drain had been blocked with leaves. The men laugh softly, not cruelly, because everyone knows water will use any excuse. You smile a little. In your work, blame travels faster than understanding, but understanding tends to arrive eventually. The break ends without being announced. One man lifts a board, another checks the rope. You set the cup down and return to the kettle, because the afternoon's tasks have begun forming themselves around the available heat. The fire has settled into a reliable bed. The tar is ready for carrying. Your rest has been brief, but it has touched you. The next job is a cart cover, heavy canvas treated at the edges where rain seeps through folds and seams. It lies spread over boards, stiff from old coatings and weather. Canvas has its own smell, dusty, waxy damp in creases, with traces of horse, grain and storage. You kneel beside it, and the fabric feels cold through your trousers. Treating canvas requires a different hand. Too much hot tar can make it stiff and clumsy. Too little does nothing. You work along the seam, using a brush that has been scraped nearly clean, laying down a thin, dark band and pressing it into the stitching. The thread drinks the material. The fold darkens. You move slowly, following the line where water has probably entered before. The owner stands nearby, worried about the cover but pretending not to be. A cart cover may look humble, yet it protects goods, tools, perhaps a family's small living. When rain enters a load, loss can travel far beyond the wet cloth. You understand this, so you do not rush the seam. Your brush follows each stitched valley with steady attention. The smell of hot tar on canvas differs from tar on wood. It is flatter, more cloth-like, with a hint of old dust rising as the heat enters the fibers. You smooth the coated seam with a scrap, lifting excess before it pools. The fabric gives under your fingers, stiff in some places, supple in others, and your hand adjusts without needing instruction. You turn the cover with help, because coated canvas sticks to itself if folded carelessly while warm. The men lift, shift, and lay it down again. The movement is slow and awkward but successful. You treat another seam, then a corner, then a worn place where the canvas has rubbed against a cart frame. Each patch is modest, yet the work takes time. This is how the day expands. Not with great events, but with small needs that reveal their true size only when you kneel beside them. A seam is longer than it looked. A corner is more worn. A patch must dry before the cover can be moved. The kettle waits, the fire changes, and you move between tasks as patiently as you can. When the cover is finished, you step back and see the darkened seams lying across it like quiet roads. They will stiffen as they cool. The owner touches one edge with a careful finger, then pulls back from the tackiness. You tell him to leave it open a while. He nods, perhaps already thinking of the next journey, the next rain, the next load. Your knees are slow to straighten. You use one hand on a board, and tar from the glove leaves a mark there too. You sigh, but softly. The board was no clean table. It belongs to the yard, and the yard accepts marks the way a ledger accepts numbers. Still, you scrape it, because each small cleanup keeps disorder from winning too easily. The afternoon light has thickened again. Clouds press low over Tallinn, and the harbour air moves inland, carrying a damp chill through the lane and into the yard. You feel it in the places where sweat has cooled under your clothes. This is one of the trade's uncomfortable balances. Fire warms the outside of you while dampness cools the inner layers. You return to the kettle and stand near enough to feel heat through your trousers. The relief is immediate but incomplete. Your back warms, your hands warm, your feet remain cold inside boots that have known too many wet stones. You shift your weight, and the sole of one boot makes a tacky little sound where it meets a smear you missed earlier. You clean it with the scraper, both the stone and the boot edge. Not perfectly, enough. The word comes back often, because work would never end if everything had to be restored to purity. You make the yard safe, workable, and prepared. That is the standard. Anything more belongs to a cleaner life than the one around a tar kettle. A messenger comes from a building near the old streets, asking whether someone can bring a little tar before evening. There is a crack along a flat shed roof where stored coal is getting damp. Coal dust and tar make a filthy job, and everyone knows it. Still, damp coal is its own trouble, so you agree to go when the next pot is ready. The walk is short but awkward, because the pot must stay warm enough and the streets are slick. You carry it covered, close to the body but not touching. The messenger moves ahead, glancing back as if your pace worries him. You do not hurry. Hot tar punishes hurry. Wet stones punish hurry. A tired man punishes himself when he forgets both. The old streets hold sound differently than the yard. Footsteps echo between walls. A cart clatter turns a corner before the cart appears. Voices rise from doorways and vanish quickly. The smell of your pot moves with you, distinct even among smoke, horses, damp stone, cooking, and coal. People do not need to turn their heads to know what you carry. The shed roof is low, blackened by coal dust and damp. Everything nearby seems to smudge the hand. The crack is along a board joint where water has gathered and worked patiently. You clean it first, though cleaning coal dust is a compromise. It clings to tar, to cloth, to sweat, to breath. Your rag becomes blacker than black. When the warm tar touches the joint, coal dust darkens the surface instantly. You press through it, making sure the material reaches the crack rather than merely decorating the top. The smell is harsher here, with coal dust under tar smoke, and you keep your face slightly turned. The work is low, awkward, and plain. It will probably be invisible by tomorrow. You make 2 passes, because the first one sinks unevenly into the dirty surface. The second gives the seam body. You feather the edges with the brush, so water will run across rather than gather at a ridge. The shed owner watches anxiously. You tell him to keep weight off it until it has settled. He agrees, though agreement and practice are not always the same thing.
On the way back, your gloves are fouled with coal dust and tar together, a stubborn blackness even by the standards of your day. You hold your hands away from your coat as much as possible. The pot is nearly empty and cooling. The street has grown busier with late-day movement, and you pass through it like a small moving piece of the industrial city, smelling of heat and dark materials. Back in the yard, you clean the pot while warmth remains. Coal dust has no place in the main kettle if you can avoid it. You scrape carefully, wipe, scrape again, and leave the worst rag aside for disposal or some rough use where cleanliness no longer matters. The work of preventing contamination is quiet, but it saves trouble later. The fire has lowered, and for once you are grateful. The day is approaching the hour when new work should be refused unless the need is truly immediate. You stir the remaining tar and judge how much must be kept warm for cleaning. Your eyes feel gritty, your throat is dry, your hands have that heavy overused feeling of tools left out in weather. And as the afternoon leans toward evening, you begin again the slow turning from service to order, though another worker's voice may still call your name before the yard fully lets you go. The call comes from near the gate, but it is not another roof, not this time. A barrel has leaked a little, where a lower stave has shrunk or been knocked, and the owner wants a temporary sealing until proper repair can be made. The barrel does not hold anything dangerous, only a stored material that must not be lost or fouled by damp. A small job, he says again. Small, of course. You take a bit of warm tar and a strip of cloth. The barrel stands on blocks, its lower side darkened by seepage and old dirt. You wipe the place as best you can, feeling the curved wood under your palm. Barrel work is awkward because curves reject flat thinking. The patch must bend, cling, and hold against pressure, swelling, and the rough handling of storage. You warm the cloth near the pot so it becomes more willing. Then you press tar into the narrow fault and lay the strip over it, coating again from the outside. The cloth darkens, sticks, and begins to become part of the barrel's surface. You smooth it with a wooden paddle, working from the center outward, pushing out air and excess. Your movements are slow and firm. The owner asks whether it will last. You give the same kind of answer you gave before. It will serve for now, if the barrel is left alone and not dragged across the yard. You do not sell miracles. You give a practical repair and the conditions under which it may succeed. In a working life, honesty often sounds like limitation. The patch shines wetly. The barrel smells of wood, storage, and warm tar. You step back, and your boot scrapes against grit. This small repair has cost more attention than its size suggested. That is often how small repairs behave. They borrow care from the tired end of the day, and if you refuse them, tomorrow may charge more heavily. Now you return to the kettle with a firmer intention to end. The sky has dimmed. The yard's edges are blurring. Men's faces look more tired in the grey light, less guarded, more like the boys they once were. Someone stacks the last boards under cover. Someone shuts a storehouse door. The sounds are slower now, each one separated by a little more silence. You scrape the brush again. This brush has lived through timber, canvas, and roof work in the same day, and its bristles are uneven with use. You press it against the kettle wall, drawing the last useful tar back into the mass. Your wrist circles, lifts, presses, releases. The motion has become nearly meditative, though the hand aches inside it. The buckets are checked for grit, standing water, and cooling streaks that can be reclaimed. You set one near the remaining warmth, soften a thick band inside it, and scrape downward. The tar peels slowly, resisting the scraper like a stubborn skin. It folds into the bottom, then can be coaxed back toward use. Nothing about it is quick. A worker passing behind you says the rope looks good. You glance toward the lean-to. The line hangs dark, still tacky in places, but evenly coated. The comment is brief, and you answer with a nod. It warms you more than you expected. Not praise exactly. Recognition. Recognition is enough when it comes from someone who knows what he is looking at. You think again of the boy asking whether tar is heavy. You might answer differently now, after another long day. Yes, it is heavy in the hand, heavy in the air, heavy in the clothing, heavy in the care it asks of you. But it is also useful, and usefulness can make heaviness bearable. The body accepts many burdens more easily when the reason is clear. The fire is opened and lowered. You move embers with the poker, each shift sending a brief glow through the ash. The kettle gives off less smoke now. The surface of the tar begins to dull at the edge. You will not need it fully liquid again tonight. You only need to leave it ready to be found by morning's fire. The cover is brought. Before placing it, you check the rim one more time. A clot of dirty tar clings near the backside. You scrape it loose. It falls onto the board beside other black scraps, small and irregular. Tomorrow, if clean enough, some may be returned to heat. If not, they will be discarded. Judgment follows even scraps. Your arms are heavy when you lift the cover. Another man helps, and together you set it over the kettle. The sound is low, iron against iron. Final for the moment, but not final forever. Heat remains beneath it. The tar is not gone. The work is not finished for all time. It is only set down carefully until the next need. The yard seems wider once the kettle is covered. Its center has quieted. Without the open black surface and rising smoke, other things become clearer. The damp wall, the hanging rope, the patched cart cover, the boards with darkened ends. Each carries part of the day's labor, and you move among them as if checking sleeping children. Though you would never phrase it so, you lift the worst rag with 2 fingers and place it where it belongs, away from flame, away from clean tools. Tarred rags can be troublesome if neglected, and even without naming every risk, workers know that oily, tarry things deserve respect. The yard's safety depends less on rules written somewhere than on habits repeated by tired people. The poker cools near the firebed. You do not put it away too soon. Hot metal in the wrong place is a silent trick. You leave it where no one will grab the heated end. Then you gather the scraper, the paddle, the smaller pot, and the ladle, each object leaving a dark print in memory even when the hand is empty. Evening deepens. The first lamps show beyond the yard. Their light does not reach far, but it gives the damp air a golden grain. Smoke from other fires moves above walls, and the city takes on the mingled smell of supper, coal, wet wool, horse, and old stone. Your own yard contributes tar and ash to that mixture, a small dark note in the larger breath of Tallinn. You wash at the yard if water is available, though the result is modest. The cold water shocks the skin. Soot loosens. Tar remains. You rub with a coarse cloth, watching black streaks move over your knuckles and wrists. The water runs into the dirt, carrying only the easiest part of the day away. The deeper part stays with you. The younger worker asks if he should cover the wood again. You say yes, and watch him do it. He tucks the canvas badly at first, leaving a low place where rain could collect. You tell him to lift that corner and pull it tighter. He does. This is how knowledge travels, not in grand instruction, but in correcting a corner before weather makes the lesson more expensive. When he finishes, the canvas sheds the last drizzle drops cleanly. You nod once. He sees it. The yard is quieter for a moment, and that small shared understanding enters the evening without needing more words. Tomorrow, perhaps, he will remember the canvas before you ask. Perhaps not. Work teaches by returning. You take up your things and prepare to leave again. This time the air has a sharper bite. The clouds have lowered, and somewhere beyond the roofs, the harbor wind is gathering itself for night. You glance back at the kettle, covered, dark and cooling. It looks almost harmless now. But you know how much attention it required while awake. The gate closes behind you with a familiar sound. The lane receives you, wet and dim. You begin the walk home as before, but no walk is exactly the same. Tonight the street smells more strongly of coal smoke. Tonight the stones hold more water. Tonight your hands ache differently, from rope and canvas as much as bucket and brush. You pass a bakery doorway and catch a wave of warmth. Bread, yeast, ash, and human shelter. It makes you aware of hunger again. For a few steps, the smell of bread sits above the tar in your senses, and the change feels almost like a window opening. Then the wind shifts, and your coat reminds you of where you have been. A lamplighter may be making his own round somewhere nearby. raising light from post to post with a tool held upward. His job and yours are different, but they share a certain rhythm, public usefulness performed quietly in weather. He brings light to streets. You bring resistance to rain. Neither of you expects much notice unless something fails. The thought passes as you turn another corner. You do not dwell on it. Workers are often too tired for philosophy, though their lives contain it anyway. Your boots strike the cobbles in a slow, reliable pattern. The city's damp walls hold the sound close. Above, a window glows, and a shadow moves behind the curtain. At home, the washing repeats. Coat away, boots scraped, hands into water, soap worked patiently. The day releases in layers, first loose dirt, then soot, then a little tar, then almost nothing more. You study your hands under the dim light, seeing cracks, stains, roughened knuckles, and the slight redness where heat met skin. They look like your trade.
Supper tastes better tonight, because hunger has sharpened quietly. You eat without haste. The room is warmer than the lane, and warmth settles into the body slowly, like tar softening from the edges inward. Your shoulders lower, your fingers uncurl. The noise of the day recedes, though the smell remains at the boundary of everything. If someone speaks to you, you answer softly. The voice after smoke can sound lower, roughened at the edges. You drink and feel the throat ease. You may say the rope went well, or the rain held off long enough, or the wood was better than yesterday. These are ordinary reports, but within them lies the whole texture of the day. Later, near sleep, your mind returns not to the hardest lift, but to a small image. The rope hanging dark under the lean-to, evenly coated, each strand holding its share. It pleased you because it showed patience clearly. The line had been dry and vulnerable in places, and now it was prepared. There is a particular rest in having prepared something well. The night gathers around that thought. Outside, Tallinn breathes through chimneys, drains, alleys, and harbour water. Inside, your body lets go by degrees. The ache in the forearm remains, but it softens when you stop resisting it. The fingers, no longer holding brush or bucket, settle against the blanket. The smell of tar is faint now, but still near. Morning will ask again, and because this is a working life, you will answer again. Yet the answering need not be dramatic. It may be as simple as rising, dressing, stepping into cold air, and walking back toward the yard where the kettle waits. A hard job is often made of ordinary acts repeated until they become a person's shape. The next morning brings a little frost at the edges of puddles. Not deep winter, not yet, but enough to make the yardstones pale in shallow rims. You step carefully. Frost over tar smears can be treacherous, and frost over smooth cobbles can make even a familiar path feel slightly untrustworthy. The cold has a clean bite, and your breath leaves you in small clouds. The kettle's cover is stiff with cold. You lift it with both hands and set it aside. The tar inside looks harder than before, its surface dull and slightly wrinkled where cooling pulled it inward. You tap it lightly with the rod. The sound is muted, almost wooden. The work of warming will be longer today, so you start without resentment. Fire building in frost has a sharper pleasure. The first flame seems brighter against the grey air. The wood snaps more crisply once it catches. Smoke rises pale and then turns dark as the fire strengthens. You stand close and feel your face wake under the heat. Behind you, the city is still dim, and the harbour wind carries a metallic cold. The frost also changes the tools. Handles feel harder. Metal takes warmth from the hand. Buckets left under cover still hold a chill that travels through glove and skin. You rub your palms together, then return to arranging the fire. A tar kettle man must befriend discomfort without becoming careless around it. Cold hands can be clumsy hands. Today's first task is not urgent, which helps. A long shed roof needs checking after earlier damp complaints, but no one is standing over you demanding immediate tar. This gives the kettle time to warm properly. You use the weighting to inspect the ladder, tighten a loose wrapping on a brush handle, and chip away a hardened lump near the ladle's lip. The tar softens slowly, very slowly. You stir at the edge, then wait. Feed the fire, then wait. Test again, then wait. The rhythm is almost sleepy, if not for the cold. Your whole attention narrows to signs of change. A glimmer here, a little give there, a thread lifting from the rod instead of breaking. These small signs become encouraging. A man from the yard stamps his boots nearby and asks whether winter will come early. You shrug, because weather belongs to itself. In Tallinn, cold can arrive with warning or slip in overnight, silvering boards and tightening every hinge. For your work, the first frosts mean longer mornings, thicker tar, stiffer brushes, and bodies reluctant to bend. When the tar is finally ready enough, you fill a small bucket and prepare for the shed roof. The ladder rungs are cold under your glove. Frost remains in shaded patches, so you wipe what you can and climb with extra care. The roof boards are rough, their edges silvered slightly where damp has frozen. You kneel on a sack that crackles faintly with frost. Before applying tar, you clear the seam. The scraper lifts frozen grit, old flakes, and a little moss made brittle by cold. Each scrape sounds sharper than it would in warmer weather. Your breath falls toward the boards and vanishes. The bucket beside you steams faintly in the cold air, sending up that familiar dark sweetness. The first stroke stiffens quickly. You notice it at once. The tar leaves the brush warmly, but begins to lose flow as soon as it meets the chilled wood. So you work in shorter sections. Dip, press, smooth, return. Dip, press, smooth, return. The seam darkens inch by inch, not because you hurry, but because you refuse to let the cold waste the heat you carried up. This is one of the honest difficulties of the job. The material may be ready in the kettle, and less ready by the time it reaches the work. Distance matters. Wind matters. The temperature of wood matters. A bucket that was perfect near the fire can become stubborn on a roof. So you adapt, keeping the work close to what the day permits. Below, someone feeds the fire while you work, and you are grateful. A kettle left to cool would cost you dearly now. You hear the wood crackle through the roof boards and the muted movements of the yard beneath. The sound steadies you. Your own brush moves along the seam, darkening the pale frosted line until it looks sealed and quiet. When you climb down, your knees feel cold from kneeling despite the sack. Your hands feel hot and chilled at the same time, a strange mixture from bucket heat, frost, and effort. You hand down the brush, then descend carefully, placing each boot where wood and rung will hold. Back on the stones, the yard feels almost warm by comparison, though it is not. The kettle welcomes you with heat. You stand near it and let sensation return to your fingers, not too close, because warmed numb hands can misjudge distance. You flex them slowly. The glove creases, the tar on the fingertips tugs. You breathe in smoke and feel the morning's cold begin to loosen from your chest. A small patch remains on the shed roof, but you wait until the next bucket warms through. Waiting can feel like lost time to someone counting from outside the work. From inside, it is part of accuracy. You know the difference between delay and readiness. You have learned it from every stubborn morning when cold tar made a liar of haste. While the next small bucket heats, you clear the kettle rim and check the firebed. The coals are forming well now, red and deep beneath the wood. That will help. A steady bed of coals is better than a showy flame for much of the day. Flames impress the eye. Coals serve the kettle. A worker learns which kind of heat matters. The second trip to the roof goes better. The wood has lost some frost near the patched area, and the tar arrives a little hotter. You finish the seam, feather the edges, and inspect the line from one side, then the other. No pale gaps, no ridge high enough to trap water, no loose grit embedded where it would weaken the surface. You come down with a quieter mind. The first real job of a frosty morning has been done well.
It does not make the rest of the day easy, but it gives the day a foundation. Workers know this feeling. A good first task steadies the hands for what follows, just as a poor beginning can trouble the whole morning. By late morning, frost has retreated from the sun-touched stones, leaving them wet and dark. The yard smells strongly of thaw now, earth, damp boards, ash, and tar. Water drips from the canvas edge in slow intervals. Each drop falls with a tiny sound near the wood stack, and you notice it because noticing small water is part of who you are. A delivery arrives then, a barrel that must be moved nearer storage. It is not light, and the hoops are cold under the hand. You help roll it carefully over boards laid across the worst stones. The barrel thuds softly with each turn, and you feel the weight in your legs and back. Tar work often includes handling containers before the material ever reaches the fire. Rolling a barrel requires agreement between men. Push, pause, correct, push again. A barrel wants to follow the ground slope and its own round will. You guide it with both palms, shoulder ready, boots braced. When it settles into place near the storage wall, everyone stands a moment to breathe. The barrel smells faintly of pine tar, even through its closed top. You inspect the hoops and the bung, because leakage later would make tomorrow miserable. The wood seems sound. A little dark tackiness near one seam may be old staining rather than a fresh problem. You mark its position in your mind. If it grows, you will know. This is another habit of the trade, remembering the small, suspicious places. The morning has become a chain of observations. Frost here, warmth there, a softened edge, a barrel mark, a patch cooling well, a rope still tacky under the lean-to. You carry all of it lightly, not as a list, but as a field of awareness. The yard exists in your mind as a working map, and as the frost gives way to wet noon, the job turns again toward the wider city, where someone has sent word for tar at the rear of a washhouse near the old lanes. The washhouse sits low and damp, which is no surprise. Steam, water, wooden thresholds, tubs, stone floors, and winter air make a place like that difficult to keep sound. You carry a small covered pot through lanes where laundry steam and chimney smoke mingle. The air smells of soap, wet cloth, coal, and the sea's cold breath folded through everything. At the rear, a wooden step has begun to rot at one corner where water runs from a drain. Tar will not make rotten wood new, and you know that. But it can slow the wetting of the sound parts nearby, seal a joint and protect a replacement piece until better repair can be made. Practical work often lives between perfect repair and no repair at all. You crouch near the step. The stone beneath is cold enough to make your knee ache through the cloth. The wood smells damp and sour where it has softened. You scrape away what will not hold, careful not to pretend weakness is strength. Then you dry the surface as best you can with a rag warmed near the pot. It is imperfect, but better. The tar goes on in a narrow line along the joint where water has been entering. You press it deep with the edge of a paddle, then coat the fresh replacement strip the washhouse man has brought. Steam from inside drifts through a cracked doorway, warm and soapy, touching your face before disappearing into the cold. The contrast feels almost gentle. Women's voices sound within, low and occupied with their own labor. Cloth is lifted, wrung, slapped, rinsed, folded. Their work has water everywhere. Yours tries to keep water in its place, and for a moment the two trades seem to meet at the threshold. You keep your eyes on the joint, respectful of the work inside and the work under your hand. The patch will need watching. You say so. The washhouse man nods, looking at the dark line as if hoping it will do more than you promised. People often want tar to be a magic skin against all dampness. It is not. It is a useful skin if the surface is prepared, the heat right, the weather reasonable, and the future not too cruel. On the walk back, the pot is empty enough to swing lightly, though you keep it steady by habit. The old lanes are busier now. A woman carrying folded cloth passes carefully around you, and you turn your tarred side away. A child looks at the black pot with interest. You continue, leaving a faint smell of warm tar behind you in the cold air.
Back at the yard, the kettle remains alive. The fire has been tended well enough and the tar is workable. You feel a quiet gratitude toward whoever added wood with sense rather than enthusiasm. Too much flame would have changed the surface badly. Too little would have cost time. Good tending leaves little evidence except the absence of trouble. You stir and find the texture right. The rod moves with a slow, deep pull. The surface folds smoothly and a dark gleam follows the movement. You stand there for a few breaths, simply stirring, letting the repetition settle your thoughts after the walk through the city. The yard's sounds return around you like familiar walls. A late noon meal follows, if the work allows it. You eat under shelter, with the smell of washhouse soap still faint in your memory and tar stronger on your sleeves. Your bread is firmer today, your fingers colder. You break it carefully. A bit of crumb falls onto your coat and sticks to a tarred smear, becoming part of the day's small absurdity. You brush it away with a tired smile. The body receives food gratefully. It has burned warmth standing in cold, lifting, climbing, and holding itself steady near hot material. Sleep listeners may think of the work as slow, and it is. But slow does not mean easy. A slow task can wear deeply because it asks for attention without giving the quick relief of completion. When you rise again, the afternoon is already waiting in its patient way. A cart cover from yesterday has set well enough to move, but one edge has stuck to a board where it was laid too soon. You soften the place with careful warmth and lift it gradually, not tearing the fabric. The owner winces as if the cloth was skin. You work gently. The stuck edge releases with a slow pulling sound. Some fibers remain on the board, but the seam holds. You smooth the area and add a thin touch of tar where lifting exposed a pale streak. The cover is saved. The owner exhales. You set the board aside to be scraped later. Nothing in this yard leaves without a little afterwork. The cart cover is folded loosely, not tightly, because new tar needs time. You help lift it into place where it can continue to set under shelter. Your gloves stick to it twice. Each time you separate them slowly. A careless pull could mar the surface or lift a patch. Sticky materials teach patience with almost comic persistence. Then comes a quieter task, coating the lower ends of fence posts before they are set into damp ground. The posts lie in a row, pale and rough, smelling of fresh wood. You warm a deeper pot and dip the ends one by one, twisting slightly so the tar covers all sides. When lifted, each post drips darkly for a moment before the coating begins to cling. This work is repetitive enough to become almost hypnotic. Lift, dip, turn, hold, set to drain. Lift, dip, turn, hold, set to drain. The posts gather in a black-ended row, like a line of workers with boots newly polished by a very severe hand. You do not make that joke aloud. You only notice the image and let it pass. The dipped ends will go into earth, where damp waits without wind or light. Tar helps protect them, though it cannot stop time completely. That is a truth you meet often. Your work delays decay, it does not abolish it. There is no sadness in that tonight. Much of human labor is the art of giving useful things more time. The pot cools between posts, so you return it near the kettle and stir. The heat comes back. You dip again. A younger worker takes the finished posts and sets them carefully over scraps to avoid dirt sticking to the tar. He has learned something from the rope and the canvas. You see it, and you say only, "Good there." He adjusts one post with evident pride. The afternoon begins to darken earlier than it should, under clouds thick with possible rain. You glance upward, then toward the open tasks. The fence posts are nearly done. The kettle has enough heat. The yard has enough cover if people move sensibly. You begin to sort the day in your mind. What must be finished? What can wait? What would become trouble if abandoned? This sorting is part of the Tar Kettle Man's hidden work. It is not enough to know how to heat tar. You must know the order in which tasks can safely happen. A roof seam before rain, a brush cleaned before cooling, a spill cleared before foot traffic, a covered barrel before night damp. Time itself becomes a material you handle. The final fence post is dipped and set aside.
The row looks orderly, dark ends raised slightly, pale bodies aligned toward the wall. Rain would not ruin them now, if they are left to cure where they are. You clean the pot. The scrape of wood against metal is steady, almost sleepy. Your shoulders have grown heavy again. A few drops begin to fall. Not drizzle this time, but slow, distinct drops that darken the dust where they land. The yard responds at once. Canvas pulled. Tools moved. Boards shifted. You carry the cleaned pot under shelter and return for the brush. The kettle cover is readied but not placed yet, because the remaining heat may still be needed for cleanup. Rain on warm yard stones releases a smell of mineral dust and ash. Rain near tar sharpens the air. You stand close to the kettle, watching that no water enters where it should not. The drops tick softly on wood, cloth, metal, and the cover waiting beside you. Each surface gives the rain a different voice. The shower strengthens for a few minutes, enough to make everyone retreat under cover, except for necessary movements. You and another man lift the cover and set it over the kettle. The iron sound feels reassuring. The tar is protected. The fire below is lower now, but still warm. Smoke escapes from the side in a pale, flattened ribbon. Under the lean-to, the air grows crowded with smells. Wet clothes, tarred rope, damp wood, human breath, smoke drifting sideways. You stand with the others without much talk, listening to rain on the roof above you. The newly coated rope hangs near your shoulder. The fence posts lie in their row. The day, for a moment, is held in suspension. Rain pauses work, but it also reveals work. Water runs from roof edges and gutters. It beads on coated surfaces. It finds low places in the yard. You watch without seeming to watch, learning where tomorrow may need attention. A stream forms near the wood stack but does not reach under the canvas. Good. A drip falls near the cart cover but misses it. Also good. The shower begins to pass. The sound thins. Drops become separate again. Someone steps out first, then another. The yard resumes with the cautious air of a room after interruption. You remove the kettle cover only enough to check the heat and surface, then replace it loosely. There will be no more major tar work today if the rain continues nearby. Instead, the ending begins early, and perhaps that is a mercy. You attend to tools under shelter, using warmth already stored in metal and material. The brush is scraped thoroughly. The pot from the posts is wiped while still soft. The bucket used for the shed roof is warmed near the covered kettle's side, just enough to loosen a stubborn streak. Rainwater gathers along the edge of the lean-to and falls in a steady line. You keep your tools away from the splash. The younger worker forgets once, setting a scraper too near the drip, and you move it without scolding. Then you point to the wet mark it left on the board. He nods. Lessons are easier to accept when they arrive quietly. The yard grows dim, though the day is not fully over. Clouds and rain steal light early. The city beyond the gate becomes a soft blur of movement and lamp glow. You feel the tiredness of standing still now, different from lifting, different from climbing. Waiting under rain can make the body stiffen in place. You shift your feet and flex your knees. You think of the roof patches from the morning. They are being tested already. The shed seam under frost, the washhouse threshold, the old gutter joint from yesterday, the warehouse patch. Water is visiting them one by one. It is not a dramatic test, only rain doing what rain does. But you feel connected to those places through the dark material you left behind. That connection is one reason the work stays in the mind after hours. You do not simply finish a thing and forget it. You know rain may prove it. Frost may lift it. A boot may scuff it. A careless fold may stick it. The job extends into future weather, and some small part of you follows it there. But you cannot follow everything. The body has limits. The evening has arrived. The kettle is covered. The fire lowered. The tools nearly clean enough, and the rain has made new outdoor work unwise. So you begin the final checking with a slower pace, moving from station to station, under the low sound of dripping eaves. The rope remains sheltered. You touch it lightly with the back of a gloved finger and feel tackiness, but not running wetness. Good. The fence posts are covered from direct rain. The cart cover is folded loosely away from splash. The barrel delivered that morning stands dry enough under its shelter. The suspicious seam has not changed. You remember that. The kettle cover sits properly, angled so rain does not pool at the rim. The fire beneath is low. You crouch and look through the side opening, seeing only dull red in the ash. No lively flame remains to demand feeding. No stray ember has wandered near rags or wood chips. You push one coal inward with the poker and listen to it settle. The smell of wet ash rises sharply. It is one of the least elegant smells of the yard, flat and grey, with a bitterness that sits low in the nose. Yet even that smell tells you useful things. It tells you where heat and water have met. It tells you the fire is reducing. It tells you the day is entering its cooler, safer state. You set the poker aside where it can cool. This time you mark its place clearly for the younger worker, pointing to the heated end and then to the wall. He understands. Fatigue makes people reach without thinking. A tool set properly at dusk can spare a burned palm. Such precautions are small kindnesses disguised as habit. Rain keeps falling lightly. It softens voices. A man speaks from the gate, but his words blur until he steps closer. He only asks whether the yard is closing. You say nearly. He looks toward the covered kettle and the sheltered materials, then nods. No new work enters. The day has finally stopped adding tasks. Nearly closing is not closed. You gather the last rags, sort those that can serve another rough use from those too fouled with grit, coal dust or water. You set the salvageable ones where they will not freeze into useless shapes overnight. Cloth can become a problem too when neglected. Everything in a yard has a way of asking for attention eventually. The scraper has one clean edge left, and you protect it by wiping the other side first. A dull scraper wastes effort. You have learned this in your wrist. Tools that are not kept usable make tomorrow's work heavier before it begins. So even now, with rain outside and supper somewhere ahead, you give the scraper the care it has earned. The covered kettle ticks softly as metal cools. The sound is small, intermittent, almost like a quiet clock. You stand near it and listen. Heat leaving iron makes its own speech, faint and irregular. The rain answers on the lean-to roof. Between those sounds, the yard seems to breathe itself toward night. A final round of the yard confirms what you need to know. No bucket in the path, no open barrel, no exposed woodpile, no burning scrap, no fresh spill shining in the dimness. Your eyes move slowly, trained by too many mornings of finding what some tired man left wrong the night before. Tonight, at least, the order holds. You take your coat from its peg, though it is already on you in smell if not in weight. The fabric is damp at the shoulders where rain touched it earlier. You settle it around yourself and feel the day's stiffness in every fold. Your gloves are not clean, but they are less dangerous to touch. Your boots are dark with wet stone and old tar. The younger worker leaves first, stepping carefully around the puddle near the gate. You watch him notice it without being told. That is good. He has begun to see the yard as a place that can trip, stain, burn, chill, and teach. Seeing is the first layer of competence. Doing comes next, then remembering without being asked. You close the gate after him, or someone else does, and the street beyond receives the day's workers one by one. Rain has polished the cobbles, and lamps tremble in the wet places. Your own reflection appears briefly in a shallow puddle, dark coat, rounded shoulders, cap low, then breaks as your boot passes through it. The walk home in rain is slower, not because you fear rain, but because wet stone deserves respect. The smell of the city is richer now, as if every wall and roof has released what it held during dry hours. Smoke descends, drains murmur, horses leave dark tracks. Somewhere, a door opens and warmth spills onto the street in a brief golden shape. You pass the wash house, or perhaps only think of it as you pass a lane with steam rising. The threshold patch will be cooling in damp air, asked already to begin its work. You imagine the water finding the dark line and turning aside. Whether it does so perfectly is a question for tomorrow, but tonight you let the image remain gentle. At another corner, water drops from a gutter in a regular beat. You hear it before you see it. The joint there might need attention someday. You look up automatically. The lamp glow catches falling drops, each one bright for a moment before it disappears. A city teaches its workers to notice what belongs to their trade, even when they are off duty. You continue through the rain, carrying the day toward its final washing, its simple meal, its slow dark. The hardship of the work does not leave you, but neither does the quiet satisfaction. The kettle was kept. The materials were used carefully. The tasks were met in order. Rain came, and you had already prepared some of the places it wanted. Inside, warmth comes as a gradual permission. Boots off, coat hung, hands washed, water darkening again, though tonight it seems the dirt has more coal dust than yesterday. You notice the difference. You always notice. The basin becomes a small record of the day's tasks. Black grit from the shed, resin from the rope, soot from the fire. You eat while rain continues outside. The sound on the roof has a special meaning after a day like this. It is not background only. It is the world using what you worked on. Every drop belongs somewhere, and your job has been to persuade it away from the wrong places. The thought is calm, almost sleep-making, because it lets the day's labor settle into purpose. When you lie down, the rain fills the room with its soft, repeated pattern. Not sharp, not hurried, just steady water on roofs, stones, gutters, and patched seams. Your hands rest open now. The fingers twitch once, perhaps remembering the rope's twist or the bucket handle. Then they still. The smell of tar is faint, folded into wool across the room. Sleep comes with rain still speaking. In that drifting edge before dreams, the kettle may appear again, but gently, not demanding. Black iron under grey sky, a low fire, a rod moving through thick material. Your own hands steady in the smoke. The image turns slowly, the way tar turns when it has been warmed enough to move. Another morning will come after rain, and rain leaves its evidence everywhere. Puddles in the yard, wet ash if the fire bed was not covered well, swollen wood, slick ladders, a roof seam that held perhaps, and another place newly revealed. You will read those signs when you arrive, because the city writes overnight in water. For now, you sleep near the sound of that writing, while the covered kettle cools in the dark yard, and the tar inside waits, hardening into silence until fire asks it back again. By the time the last warmth has gone from the kettle, the yard seems to be holding its breath, with only the rain's faint tapping and the soft drip from the roof edge to keep you company. The iron has darkened fully now, no longer giving back heat to your hands, and the tar beneath its cover has returned to stillness, thick and silent after all its slow turning. You stand for one more moment beside it, not because there is more to do, but because leaving careful work sometimes takes a little patience of its own. The tools are back in their places, rough handles turned inward, brush resting where grit cannot reach it, scraper laid flat, buckets turned so the night rain will pass them by. Your gloves are stiff at the fingers, and your coat carries smoke, pine, ash, damp wool, and the deep black sweetness of tar. Tallinn is quieter beyond the gate, the lamps soft in the wet street, the harbour hidden in darkness but still breathing cold air through the lanes. You let your shoulders lower as the yard settles around you. No one asks for another bucket now. No scene calls from a roof. No rope waits under your hand. The work has entered the buildings, the timber, the covered edges, and the small dark lines where water will meet resistance without any witness at all. So you leave the kettle sleeping under its lid, the firebed grey, the stones damp, the tools patient in their corners. Outside, Tallinn folds itself into night, and inside the quiet yard, the tar is still, the work is done, and there is nothing left for your hands to hold.